is open. The clock is off. That clock is off by 3 minutes. So it is now 6:30 and the meeting is open. And
Guys didn't hear, we started the meeting, you weren't paying attention, sorry. Go ahead, excuse me.
thank you. Now I have your attention. The beginning of each meeting is time for public comment. So if there's something that the planning board is doing or should be doing that you want to talk to us about, if it's not on the agenda, you can come talk to us about it now. Each person who speaks goes over there to the podium, to the microphone, because that's hooked into the system with FCTV so that people at home, this is televised, can hear everything. So if you're going to speak, you have to be recognized, you have to go there, you have to state your name and your business, and then you can start. So if there's someone who'd like to speak on something not on our agenda, yes, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. My name's Dr. Manis Suffredini. I'm here with my wife, Catherine. We lived at 43 Frederick Road. We're here. We received a letter recently.
Excuse me, actually, Frederick Road property is on our agenda. So
I'm having a hard time hearing you, ma'am.
Sorry. The Frederick Road property is on our agenda, so
Yes.
there'll be a time to speak on that, but it's not now.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It'll be in a few minutes.
Yeah, thank
You don't have long to wait. Anyone on a topic not on the agenda? Okay, minutes. We have a number of minutes because of change in staffing that were not written or approved, but will be now. Paul?
I'm going to do this in two parts. I recommend approval of the minutes of September 14th, 2021, September 28th, 2021, October 26th, 2021. I recommend approval as corrected.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Secondly, we have other minutes we're catching up on, thanks to Kristen. And so I recommend approval of November 9th, 2021, December 14th, 2021, and December 21st, 2021, as corrected.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Paul. That was a lot of reading and correction to have to do. Next on our agenda, we have two pieces of property where the issue is determination of access and frontage. The first of them is number 0 Frederick Road. Who's speaking for that? Oh, excuse me, the notices?
Public meeting notice was published on January 7, 2022, and 15 abutters were notified by regular mail. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chris Harris. I'm here as the applicant for the Frederick Road hearing. Just see if I can get a couple of things open here. So we've applied, my wife and I, for the determination of access as part of due diligence for purchase of the lot. We met with Commissioner Gore, and he made us aware that this was something that we'd have to do before applying for a building permit. So the lot in question, it's kind of bisected by Frederick Road, which is a private way towards the east end of Frederick Road. We are proposing to, well, the hope is to build a single-family house on the south side of Frederick, which would have some driveway and parking on the south side, and then proposing a additional kind of overflow turnaround space on the north side of Frederick. Currently, Frederick Road ends with two houses at the far east end, so the road does already serve two houses there. That property also has a hammerhead that serves as a turnaround for garbage trucks and recycling that do traverse the road as it is currently. One thing that I wasn't sure was clear in the initial report. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but from the narrowest point of Frederick Road, I think Mr. Cornuck described it as the dirt travelway. From that portion to where the driveway parking area is proposed to be will be about 230 to 240 feet. I only mention that because I know in a previous hearing for Gale Avenue, one of the things that was talked about was adding pull-offs every 250 feet as opposed to widening the road. So I think this is similar in that regard, that it's a pretty short distance on the kind of, we'll call the roughest part of Frederick. So I just want to make sure that that was clear. We are proposing some very modest improvements just as part of this process. So this is where the dirt travel area starts. It's the steepest part of the road, and there's a section that has some kind of broken asphalt and exposed rocks. We were proposing to take those out, remove, regrade and replace with better material, more suitable material in that area. And then along the road, there are a few pretty minor potholes and just soft spots that we were proposing to improve the surface and add a little bit of a crown in that section to try and promote better drainage to the sides. This is a picture here. You can see the hammerhead turnaround on the far end of Frederick. As I said, that's already been used by recycling and garbage trucks. It's a pretty straight shot from this property towards the, looking back to the west where that narrow section of Frederick starts. So there's plenty of visibility. You can see through there. We are also proposing to limb up trees as needed, which really is pretty minor. I had written 13 feet in the application, but was corrected by the review to be 13 and a half feet. So we would propose to do that. I think that pretty much summarizes it. I know, I've talked to the people at the end of Frederick Road, explained why we have to go through this process. I'm not sure who, other than this gentleman, is from Frederick currently in the audience, but I know, the people at the end of the road, they love this road. This is quaint, it's charming, they live there. They chose to live there partly because it's quiet, and so I think we're kind of trying to tread lightly and understand that this is something that they appreciate and don't particularly want to see changed. And that's why we're drawn to it as well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer.
Okay, is there any comment you want to make, Jed, because you've been up there and made the report on it?
Well, for the record, acting town planner, Judd Cornock. The only thing I would add is that, as Mr. Harris just mentioned, that portion of Frederick Road that sort of goes up the hill, that width sort of varies, and you can see it in your report. Engineering division was out measuring, so there isn't necessarily a standard width in that area, but it's anywhere between 12 and a half to 15 feet wide. And as I put in my staff report, I think widening it to the 20 feet may be a bit excessive for this one single-family dwelling. But of course, I leave that up to the board. I was just mentioning that I thought widening the road to the 20 feet standard would be somewhat excessive for this single-family dwelling. But again, I leave that decision up to the board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Board members, any comments or questions?
So I have just a question, our policy for streets for access is what width?
So your policy for your determination of access is 20 feet.
And this is 15?
Anywhere between 12 and 15. It
12,
varies.
At widest it's 15 and at narrowest 12.
Correct. Yes.
Right. The planning board's judgment on this, needs no approval. Our standards deal only with the width of the road, access, and the construction of the road, the grading of the road.
Right.
So that's, oh, and frontage, and you don't have a problem with your frontage, the problem is with the road. I drove up there day before yesterday just to see what it would be like, and it happens in another town. I grew up on what we called the bumpy road, and we all loved it. So I'm certainly not against that kind of a road. But that is a particularly narrow road. It's really one car width. So I can see why you're thinking about having laybys along the road.
Right.
But have you considered regrading and gravel? Because the underlayment, there's no underlayment in many sections leading up to where your lot is.
I don't think that's particularly necessary just for adding one house to the road. I mean, there's already recycling and garbage trucks traversing that road regularly, weekly. So I'm not sure that it's, us adding a house to it is enough of a change to necessitate, regrading that entire stretch and adding material. We're certainly happy to add material in this area where the rocks and asphalt is and try and smooth that out. But the rest of the road is actually pretty level. There's a kind of a long slope up towards the east. And it seems to be in relatively good shape. We currently live on a road in New Silver Beach, which is significantly worse than this road, and we've lived there for 10 years, and it's, it's just...
I think the bind that this lot is in, because you're on a purchase and sale right now, it's not your lot yet. The bind for this lot is that the standard has changed since the houses around it were built, and since most of the houses in New Silver Beach were built, so that the standard we would be thinking of is different from the one way back then.
Sure.
Right. And this is a particularly narrow road. It's only one car width, and it really could use a regrading.
If I recall on the Gale Avenue discussion, which was also essentially a single-lane road, that the board felt like the pull-offs were sufficient to deal with that, as opposed to having to deal with actually widening the road. So I'm not...
I don't think
not
I'm
sure.
talking about widening the road now. We have done that before,
Okay.
and you did suggest that as a solution to your road, but it's really the condition of the road that's of more concern. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind, rather than our either voting on whether to endorse or not tonight, if you could work further with the assistant town planner and come back at our next meeting and see what you feel more commitment to doing.
Could I...
John?
I also want to have them address the referral from the water department requiring an 8-inch extension of the water main.
Thank you.
Have you seen that?
Yes, yeah, that's something that we were planning to do regardless.
Okay.
To bring water to the site, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, could I ask if the rest of the board members have any other...
Certainly. Are there any other comments and concerns on the board? Paul?
I'd like to make a brief comment. One is an observation. The original letter of request is dated December 23rd, and there's no signature, there's no letterhead. I don't know who it came from, but that's more of a procedural thing, and I think they should do it next time to document who's sending this information in on behalf of the planning board. That's not an issue. I also went up there, and I did note that the town plows Frederick Road all the way almost up to this site, and there is trash pickup along that area too. So it is actively being used, and there is an area to get out again. So
Right.
I just make that observation. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel that you can get this worked out, but let's tie it up before we make a decision on it.
But so the board's opinion is that there needs to be more work done in terms of addressing the base of the road?
The condition of the road. Jim? And the water pipe.
We set up, we've had discussions about roads like this and what the width should be, and we had a policy and we voted on it. And just like tonight, when we go off that policy, the next person then brings it in and said, well, this is what you did the last time, and this was, so our policy has already been gone and trashed, because everyone goes on what we said. So anything we do tonight is gonna be the new standard going forward. I'm gonna let you guys do what you want. You know how I stand on narrow roads, I've made it clear. But I think they should
The board's not
be,
making a decision
no,
tonight.
but I believe, you say you don't agree with the policy, you think it's good to have a 12-foot road. I disagree, but
I don't think I did say that.
I thought you said
I
it didn't
hope
need
I
to be
didn't say
widened. I misspoke. Maybe we should check it. But anyways, this is even narrower than Lewis Neck, and every time we do this, the next applicant brings in as a new standard, just like this gentleman did tonight. Heard what we said on Gale Road and said, well, that's now the new standard, not what we voted on as our policy and had a vote, but whatever we did the last time is the new standard going forward. So I guess we don't have a policy anymore, we just go from week to week.
Well, as I understand it, it's a case-by-case basis, and you are making a decision based on the particular case. If we were coming in here to build a multifamily, three-family house, that should be considered differently than if you're building a single-family house.
I'll bring the point up. Lewis Neck, we approved it for a single-family loan. Next thing you know, they had a 40B going on it for 3 or 4 families because we gave the access. And that's the point that I warned the board about before, and we're going right down the same path again. Not that you're gonna do that, but that's exactly what happened in the past, so.
But so is that,
That's why we have a policy. I guess maybe the board feels we no longer need the policy, and if that's the case, I'm all set.
Further comment? So we'll see you at our next meeting?
and just so I make sure I understand, I'm to work with Jed on what might be, what the board might be looking to see in the next hearing in terms?
Improvements to the road, right.
Perhaps we could break it up into the 3 sections, the width, the grade, and the construction. So if we could we just sort of get a sense for your feeling on the width of Frederick, and then we can move to the other 2, so that I have more information to go on. So perhaps the board can just weigh in on the width first, and then we'll deal with the next top.
Yeah, the area on this sheet that you listed, area of concern, I think that's too narrow as well. I think we need to address the width there.
Okay.
If I could add, at the west end, or, yeah, the west end where I talked about taking out the asphalt and the rocks, that section there, the grade is pretty steep on both sides of the road for maybe the first 50 to 70 feet. So I'm not sure how feasible it is to think that we can clear to both those sides and not have to do significant rework of the surrounding grades. Now, after you get through that section where the grade levels out, I think there's probably some opportunity, you know, to widen to one side or the other. But that initial section, I'm just not sure how that would be achieved without significant effort and intrusion into neighboring what is essentially yard.
Well, if I
And
read
it
the
is a
material, I
40-foot
think there's a
road
40-foot
layout, isn't it?
right-of-way, isn't there?
Yeah, there's plenty of room.
Yes.
There's
plenty
no
of room.
right-of-way issues at all.
And that's what bulldozers are made for.
Well, but the grade is coming down right to where the path is.
I know, I drove that. It's a very steep little hill right there.
So then we're talking about retaining grade at the side of where we're clearing to.
I'm not sure what we're talking about because it hasn't been looked into very thoroughly yet.
What is the slope of that one section where it's steep? Those lines are pretty close together.
It's approximately 9.6% from this.
And what's what's the typical road standard for slope?
Well, the policy indicates nothing more than 10%.
And I'd like to answer Jeb's question. It's true that we made that policy, and we have had a problem with enforcing it. And I think that it's a good thing to question that policy. Falmouth is filled with dirt roads, private dirt roads, that have been there a long time, that have a number of approved lots on them. I know they're approved. There are houses sitting on them. And in effect, by passing a policy making it impossible to build on them, that's tantamount to a taking, so that whoever owns that land now finds that it's unsaleable. And I think we need to question that policy just because of, if it were one or two instances, okay, you could think about it, but it's not going to be one or two instances. It's been at least 3 in the past year. So it's good that we're questioning it, and I think we ought to take another meeting to do that.
Well, we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place with the fire department, because they require a wider width and the additional height. And it comes down to, okay, you keep adding houses. How many houses are then being serviced by the fire department, police, et cetera? So, you know, it can be a slippery slope.
Well, the fire department appears to have approved 14 feet for Lewis Neck Road.
Yeah. So this other section is not 14 feet.
If
No,
I
it's
could
not.
just speak candidly too, I think that, yeah, as a citizen of Falmouth, I've lived here for a while, certainly probably not as long as many of you, but this policy puts a particular burden on a person buying a lot for things totally outside of that lot. So we're now dealing with issues that impact all the neighbors, but instead of the town going to those neighbors and saying, the town of Falmouth needs to widen this road, this particular policy says, you, private citizen, need to go to your neighbors and say, hey, I'm going to widen this road. Now, there are certainly instances if you're developing an entire neighborhood or you're, you know, but as a single lot, it just seems to put the owner in a very interesting position. I am totally open to go into conservation and zoning for the particular lot. That's part of the process. But now we've gone way kind of beyond the bounds of that.
I understand what you're saying. Jim?
Is this a public road or a private road?
Private.
It's a private road, so you
I
own
don't
it.
own the road. I have
You do own the
nothing to
road.
do with the road.
No, it's owned by you guys all own the road, not us.
So maybe the
Lot owns to the
town
middle.
could go survey the entire town, go to all the neighbors
No,
of
but
the private roads
I'm sorry,
and
you're
give an
making a point
assessment.
about public and private roads. This is a private road. The town doesn't own it,
Right.
so we don't maintain it. You do.
So you could petition the town to take the road.
But then they'd make you bring it up to the
And then
standards
they'd
to
make
make
you
this
bring it up.
problem go away.
Or could
So
the
you got a catch
town,
22 here. You got a private road to avoid all the standards. I mean, that's what's going, it's a private road issue.
you understand
I do,
Yeah,
I
where I'm
understand
coming
your
from, I
point.
think.
And you're not wrong about it, but it's also true that each time a house was going to go there, an applicant came here, and this apparently was never organized as a subdivision, or it wouldn't be that kind of road.
Right.
They would have to have put in a subdivision qualified road, and didn't. They put in a very substandard road.
Right.
And each time a decision has been made, the decision was to live with that substandard road because the private owners
Sure.
and the private people involved there were willing to do it.
Right.
Just as you said you were willing to put up with a narrow, dirt, actually dangerous road. And I understand that. That's okay. But it's not okay to now argue that the town needs to assume the burden of all those decisions by private parties. That's just not correct. And I think we should move on.
I just want one more question. How long, we don't approve dead-end streets longer than 500 feet. How long is Frederick Road?
In its entirety?
Its entirety? From when it becomes a dead end. And other places where we've allowed it, we've made sure that there was access in case a tree fell over the road for emergencies. And we'd make the applicant put in a dirt road coming in another way. And that's been our policy for a long, long time. And we seem to be going away from all those public safety issues. How long is this private road?
It's approximately 1,200 feet.
Okay, and
Give or
our
take.
policy is not to allow things more than 500.
Right.
Okay, so we're really stretching it here.
So once again, I say to you, Mr. Harris, which sounds funny for me to say, work with Jed between meetings, and we'll see you next time.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good, Madam Chair, just right before, in terms of the grade and the construction, in a policy, it indicates that pavement is preferred, but gravel is okay. Is there a sense for the board what you'd like to see it remain gravel, turn to pavement? Is there a sense on that?
I don't think so, because it's listed as a preference.
Okay. So in order for me to work with the applicant, I sort of need to get a sense for how you folks feel on where that surface might land, if you will.
So when the applicant is working with you,
Mhm.
he should show you a plan of how he's going to get the 8-inch water main to his property. From where it ends, it says house number 43. I don't know where that is.
Sure.
But probably going to have to tear up some of this roadway to get the water main there. And so that would be a good time to repair everything and make it as wide as we talked about and with the thickness of gravel. And it looks like there's a couple more lots there that are next to his, before
Yep.
his. It could only be one if they
Yeah.
have to combine them, I don't know, but.
2 additional lots to the west, yep. So there doesn't appear to be a either way pavement or gravel, it could be either one.
But you should show the water main extension and where that's gonna go.
Mhm.
Because if it's that narrow, you can't put a 8-inch water main in without tearing up most of the road.
Sure.
Or a good part of it anyway,
Okay.
roadway.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have another determination of access, 59 Telegraph Hill Road. Who is representing that?
Notice.
We're going to hear the notice?
Did anybody want to speak to this last applicant?
Excuse me,
Anybody in the
Oh,
audience?
Were you going to entertain any questions regarding the Frederick Road issue?
I apologize to you. Go right ahead.
I'm having a very hard time hearing,
I
I'm sorry.
think we all are.
My name is Maynard Suffredini. I live at 43 Frederick Road. My wife Catherine and I are here because we received a letter indicating that there were going to be modifications of Frederick Road at some point. Frederick Road, as you've been discussing, we have some concerns about, the way the road is right now. We understand it is a private road, and it has gone through an incredible amount of deterioration because of drainage issues. And when I read the letter and the minimum amount of time that I researched this project, my concern, and my wife, and I know my other neighbors as well in the area, have concerns of drainage and how, when it rains in inclement weather, what's going to happen with the runoff coming down, collecting particularly in front of our house. Where the road, if you have gone down that road, you can recall that Frederick Road is partially paved to one point, and then it's dirt the rest of the way in. We live in the dirt section, and that is the area that's really deteriorating, because we also have runoff from the paved road coming down into the dirt section. And there's a rut that's probably 10 inches deep right now, runs across the road. It's down as deep as the boulders. And we moved in 2007 or 8, and I used to call the town hall, DPW, and ask if they could come out and grade the road, and they did. And, it has been graded to some extent, and one of my neighbors also bought materials and spread it himself to fill in for the hole. So, quite frankly, our concerns are the runoff and the drainage, so that if anything is done in that area, that the water doesn't come down the road and collect in front of our house to create more ruts and holes. And that if anything's going to be done, maybe if it's going to be a paved section, maybe there'd be some consideration to extend the paving right up to the existing paved road. We don't know what the situation will ultimately be. I want to welcome the Harrises to the neighborhood. I know that you have a challenge, but our concerns once again is the condition of the road itself right now, and we don't want to see it get any worse. And where our house is located, our house, if you're heading east on the road, we're on the south side with the last house before it goes up into the wooded area. And we do experience some runoff from that hill that comes down into our driveway, and our garage is there. One of our neighbors has a similar layout in his house, and he's getting water into his garage on a regular basis. Fortunately, we haven't experienced that as yet, but we're deeply concerned about having that happen. So those are our issues, and I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight to present them to you, and I thank you for hearing me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point.
It is a good point.
Very good point.
Welcome. It's good to see you. Okay, we're ready to move on to our next
Is there anyone else that wants to speak?
applicant.
Is there anyone else?
Is there?
You should ask.
Who's the only person here for that property?
Okay.
So I'm the other neighbor abutting the, my name's Mike Brosnahan. My wife and I, Sandy Brosnahan, are at 40 Frederick Road, so on the opposite of Maynard and Kathy here. We share the concerns about drainage, although we're less impacted at our home. We would not be in favor of a dramatic widening of the road if that were permissible. It would really impact the character of the neighborhood. So realize there's other considerations, but we're in favor of the accommodation that Mr. Harris has asked for.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other board member?
I would like to hear the town engineers weigh in based on the other comments we've had on the roads. It looks like to me that we have a very narrow canyon, 10 feet wide with slope on either side. That if it was a developer doing this, there's no way that he would ever get it done.
Do it.
And I'd like to make sure that our other, I mean, I disagree, but I'd go along with if the fire department and the engineering department and everyone says it's okay, then I think that we should have a revote on our policy, get rid of it because you don't like it, and then we go on whatever the neighbors want, and I'm fine with doing that. But I really don't like having a policy we put in place and that we totally, it's 20 feet and this is 20% less. I mean, it's like, why do we even bother having a policy? So anyways, we'll get rid of the policy. I think we should do that.
Okay, but
Because
it'll be for a
obviously there
different
doesn't seem to be
reason.
support.
The reason will be better than that I don't like it.
Is
I
that
think
a
it's a good
motion?
idea to hear from the engineer.
No, I just want to make my point. I think that the town, I'd really like to hear what the engineers and the fire department say. To me, that looks like a canyon.
It doesn't
Was-
feel like a canyon. I've driven up there. It's not a canyon. Maybe we should make a site visit.
Probably.
Yes, between,
Let's give them a week to work out with Jed first,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
during the same period. I think that if we all go take a look at it, because, yes, it's an issue for these people and for this applicant, but it is, as Jim has pointed out, a broader policy issue. And I think, like all policies, it really ought to be well-grounded physically. So let's go take a look at it and see how it is. So, yes, we have work to do, but I think in addition to hearing from the engineers, we need to hear from the town council on this, because we now have inconsistent findings, and that's not good. So we have our own work to do between meetings.
If I may, your policy, the last item in your policy indicates that, and I quote, "Conditions may be waived by the planning board to preserve the character of the neighborhood." So you have baked into your policy the ability to waive certain requirements of the policy. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, and I think it's good that everyone knows that, but when you find yourself continually waiving a policy, I
Understood.
think you need to question the policy.
Understood.
And maybe it doesn't need rethinking, maybe we'll come to the same conclusion again, but I think there's a good chance we'll get more information. We have now got 3 instances where we've in effect, ourselves, walked through the mud for them. So we ought to go take a look at this one, see what it's like, and then come back to it.
Because we're dealing with pre-existing nonconformities. with
We
these-
are,
these
we are,
roadways.
and they're all over town.
Yeah.
This is going to keep coming up. One is coming up in a minute.
Yeah. Kids keep coming.
Right, so let's hear it. Who is speaking for,
Notices.
My understanding is that the applicant's going to get with the acting town manager. When are we going to have this back on the agenda so we'll tell people in the audience?
I think it was next week, at our next meeting.
At next meeting, yes,
Next
next
meeting,
meeting.
okay.
yes.
Right,
Let
thank
the
you.
audience know
Okay.
that.
I thought I had.
February 7th, is that?
The next meeting is February 8th.
February 8th. Thank you.
Paul, you have notices for this Telegraph Hill?
Public meeting notice was published for this project on January 7th, 2022, and 14 abutters were notified by regular mail.
Well, good evening. I'm Douglas McDonald. I am not the owner of the property, but I have it under agreement to purchase the property. Looking to buy it to help my daughter and a son-in-law to get a house, but we were looking to find some land to build something, and going through the process, we made it subject to getting a building permit. And in that process, we discovered this new policy, which I never heard about before, and that is the determination of access. And so we made an application for determination of access, and appreciate the lively discussion beforehand about the topic, but it's the same thing. I have spoken to the neighbors there. Most of everyone I spoke to liked the similar discussion. They like the road the way it is, and I'm not in a position to speak for the owners of the property, but I am looking to buy the property, and I've seen the requests that you folks have itemized in. I know they have their attorney here to speak for them.
I would just like to get the proper thing up on the screen here. We're talking about a different street.
That's you. And there's additional plans. You just
Can you,
scroll down. No, with the mouse.
oh, okay.
If you want to zoom in, it's up at the top.
Well, okay, so, let's see if I can't zoom in. No.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the zooming in feature on this.
Right in, just below that.
This road does have it's a Telegraph Hill Road, for those of you who, I'm presuming you went up there, but you do, the road does have, does have a loop, you can drive right through it, and that doesn't have a turnaround, but this is the lot here, and the road doesn't show the other half of it here, but it does, that doesn't show it there either.
If you keep scrolling down, I believe the staff report has an image. Right there, that first one.
Okay, there you go, yeah. Let me see if I make it a little bigger. So if you're coming off of Route 28A, you come up Blacksmith Shop Road, then onto Telegraph Hill Road, and there's a loop. My lot that I'm looking at getting is right here. And so we would, this is, I would call the east side of the loop would be the means of which we would travel, get in and out. So.
Okay, did you want to say anything further about the road itself?
I mean, I would just say this in general, Jim, and I understand your passion on it, and I can understand you wanting the safety of being able to get vehicles in and out of the property there. I do feel, in the sentiment from the previous gentleman, that when the town makes a policy to do something like that, and, you know, the property owner that owns this lot is, you know, I think there's maybe 15 total lots in there. It's like, okay, the last person in, because they didn't build a house on it, you know, some of the requests that you put out there, I just thought were very onerous in the sense that you're putting it all on one person. Just reading your document in there in terms of the things you wanted to have in terms of surveying work and widening the road, and I thought that was, it's not equitable, and so, you know, to the policy, if the town wants to do something on that, there's a way to address it, but putting it all onto one person, it just felt, you know, that's a bit onerous, and so I don't know what the planning board's going to make a final decision to the building department to make it a requirement if you're going to build a house on that lot. I don't know what the exact specifics are going to be. You did put a number of things there down there, and they kind of ranged the gamut. But in general, I guess the term I would say is that it doesn't seem equitable to put that on someone who happened to have purchased a lot a long time ago, hadn't built on it, and as you said, Charlotte, and I feel the same way, it's a taking, you know. If you say you need to engineer the whole road and widen it and do this, that, and the other to it, that's expensive. And that impacts the value of the property, so.
Just a quick question, is this another private road?
Yes, it is.
So
Yes, it is.
what are we taking?
We are taking the ability of the current owner, who is not this gentleman, the current owner, to sell the lot. We're taking the
So
value
it's not a
the
taking of the
property,
land, it's taking of the
The
value of.
value of the
okay.
property,
Of the use.
Of the
to which
use.
he was
Okay.
never guaranteed.
Oh, but if we start doing this, we are guaranteeing all these private roads are gonna go this way.
Well, we
And
didn't
everyone
start
will be
doing
coming
it.
in, and everyone will be coming in and quoting us, just like the last three people have. Now we've created a new ad hoc policy.
It's in our,
I know, but it's what we're doing though, right? I'm just,
the ability
listen.
to do is in our policy.
We had a discussion on Lewis Neck, and we've done it before. I'm done.
You don't have to be done, you can
I'll
speak
leave it
more.
there. I made my point clear. I'll be quiet.
I think what we're doing is taking a pause. As soon as you have something where everything is an exception, you're right, we no longer have the policy. And it's coming up too frequently. We need to re-examine it, and in order to do that, we need to know the specific instances, we need to speak with the engineers, we need to talk to Frank Duffy and see how we can do this, and we need to then think about, well, what will replace it? Maybe we don't need a policy, maybe we wanted to go case by case, but we haven't decided that yet. But we have right in front of us 2 instances that are going to keep coming for which we are unprepared. We need better prep. So I think we're better off just not trying to decide tonight, will we or won't we endorse this particular thing, because it is a very similar circumstance. I did drive up there. The side of the road that you're planning or wanting to build on is the better side. Driving up to the very top around the loop, well, that was a little surprising. But, you can do it, and it's a gorgeous view. I can definitely see why people want to be up there on top of the moraine. But the access to it, which we're supposed to judge, is not good. So that it would be a dead-end road if it ended before you go up that hill. Then it's too long, then we can't approve it because it's too long as a dead end. If that's supposed to be your egress going through the loop, that's really unsafe. So we need to rethink what we're trying to do. And I think we need to take a pause of at least the space between the meetings to see what we're going to do. Yes.
Hi, my name is Martha Prendergast. I'm the listing agent for the current owner, but Chris Ledford is the...
Yeah.
Excuse me, you need to come up there and speak.
Actually, Chris Ledford was going to go up and speak.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Christopher Lebhurst, 99 Town Hall Square. I'm representing the property owner who's here tonight, who's Joe Chow Guidobina. And as much as I frequently agree with you, Mr. Fox, I don't know if we're going to be on the same page tonight, but I'll do my best to appease you. This particular lot was laid out in 1962. And although it's laid out as an A&R plan, even the road is looked at that point in time. And there is a letter in your file from our former town planner, Wynn Davis, who commented very specifically on this particular lot. And I'm kind of kicking myself because I forgot my glasses here tonight. But he did say in a couple of places in a letter, he said, the planning board in 1962 made such a determination that Telegraph Hill Road was indeed a way in existence and indeed of suitable width, grade, and construction to provide for the needs of 2 house lots. That would be lots, I believe, 10 and 11 on the plan. That particular plan that was up earlier was a division of a parcel into 2 lots. But your town planner specifically looked at that. Okay, and I think that's pretty telling right there. He further concluded in a letter dated May 11th, 1987, he said, as no waiver of frontage was given and as these lots met these existing requirements and as the planning board made a specific determination that the way was sufficient in terms of width, grade, and construction, and as that language is identical to the requirements of the zoning bylaws on street, It is very clear that the determination once made benefits that lot and is not subject to periodic review. I think he's trying to say in the letter, we approved it and we determined it was suitable. We don't keep coming back every few years to decide, well, is it really suitable? I mean, the decision was made, it was suitable, the division of land was approved. I might further add that when this property was purchased in 2005, it was purchased partially based on a letter of buildability by the building department. And Eladio Gore, on February 24th, 2004, did write a letter, and we don't get these letters anymore, but we used to, and they were helpful, because we end up in situations like this where we're not quite sure whether we're going to get a building permit or not. It used to be very helpful before you bought the property to be able to get a letter that says you can build on it. And such a letter does exist with respect to this particular lot from Eladio Gore, who's back. He's downstairs. I'm sure he'll still stand by his letter, dated February 24th, 2004. I believe it was the owner's father, uncle, father, that bought, I'm sorry, husband that originally purchased the property. But I'm looking at a deed from 2005, and this is real money. That lot was purchased for $210,000. And to your point, Ms. Harris, if you subsequently come back to a person and say, you know what, well, we don't like the access anymore, what happens to the lot that you paid $210,000 for? It becomes a lot worth arguably nothing, or certainly less than what you paid for it. That's your taking. The taking is your loss of value, your loss of being able to subject your property to its highest and best use. Those are the terms you see in land damage suits. Those are the terms that you see flying around land court when these types of things end up in litigation. You certainly take away a lot. You buy it as a building lot. You pay taxes on it for the last 20 years as a building lot, and then when you dare choose to build on it, you're told, well, now you have a problem with access, you can't build. You can see how we have a problem here, and to have that blanket policy, I know that Mr. Cornock mentioned maybe there's ways around the policy here, or there's certainly you can condition it, but a blanket policy can be a major problem. It's like mandatory sentencing in the criminal courts, where one person who stole a Tootsie Roll is in jail for the same amount of time as the person who robbed the bank. You have to look at situations, and you have to be allowed to use common sense. Common sense. This particular road has 13 developed properties already. There are 2 lots left, and this is one of them. Is it really fair to say you're number 14 and you can't build unless, all sorts of major improvements are made? And the other 13 lots who I don't know whether these concerns even came up when they were buying and building and developing, but to turn around and say it to one lot owner, you can't build, boy, that's one heck of a hardship, isn't it? And I'm going to ask everybody to maybe just consider using a little common sense in the situation.
We appreciate your statement. Thank you.
He's saying we can't build. We're not saying it can't build. We say the road needs to be improved so you can build. You just want to.
But you're making it economically infeasible when you tell someone to go and develop Telegraph Hill Road and other 13 other lots get a pass on it.
We're just saying the road has to be improved.
At the moment, we're not saying
anything.
Ooh.
But we agree it's a buildable lot, but the road has to meet a standard, and it doesn't. And then your point is we shouldn't have any standards, because once, if they did 25 or 30 years ago, 3 town planners ago, I never met this guy, said that this is a good road. Our town's changed a lot.
The Telegraph Hill Road hasn't changed a lot, Mr. Fox. It's the same road.
A lot of it is washed out. Vehicles are bigger, and standards change in all areas. But I take your point, and I appreciate your statement.
I just want to add, there's water, there's electricity. Clearly, it's laid out as a building lot. Clearly, taxes have been paid on this lot as a building lot for many, many, many years. It's one heck of a hardship to question whether or not that lot could be developed where 13 other lots were so developed. I think it's a matter of equity, and I think it's a matter of common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak on this? Yes, please come forward. We'll just be repeating ourselves.
Just be quiet.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Lake. I represent two of the abutters, Krista Longnecker and Samuel Laney. They're here tonight in the audience. They reside at 55 Telegraph Hill Road, which I can, is this parcel right here. This is the applicant's parcel highlighted in yellow. And then to the left, this parcel is owned by my clients. I think it's been, what I need to address tonight is the specific access that will be used to access the applicant's property. Obviously, there will be a use of Telegraph Hill Road, and a portion of that is located on my client's property. The applicant will have access through a right-of-way over my client's property. But in addition, the proposed driveway that's on the applicant's plan would require, let me scroll down. It's on the septic plan.
That's the one right there, yep.
Yeah. So over here, so this is the applicant's property. This property right here is my client's property. So in order to construct this proposed driveway on the applicant's property would require the construction of an extension of that driveway onto my client's property to connect Telegraph Hill Road to the applicant's property. So we are here this evening just to voice our concerns on the proposed construction. There was a letter that I submitted to the board. I have additional copies here with me tonight if any of you would like a copy. But we did set forth certain conditions with respect to the proposed construction on the property to kind of limit the impact that it would have on my client's property. Now, we certainly understand your concerns with the condition of Telegraph Hill Road in its entirety, and I understand those concerns, but we also want to, the board, to consider preserving the characteristics of the neighborhood, the road, which has been discussed before, but importantly, the clearing which could possibly be done to create this extension of the driveway to connect Telegraph Hill Road to the applicant's property. There are a number of conditions which we've proposed if the board does rule in favor of the applicant. I've outlined those in my letter, and I'd also be happy to discuss them with you tonight.
Would you like to name them?
Yes. First, I'd like to be clear that my clients are happy to welcome another neighbor to the neighborhood, but obviously have concerns about preserving the characteristics of the neighborhood and the road. The area is heavily wooded and it's very private, and that's something that my clients want to preserve. So for those reasons, we're requesting first a condition that the actual location of the proposed driveway, so that extension, this portion right here, be consistent with the plan. So we'd like to be certain as far as where that extension of the driveway is going to be located. Second, we're requesting to limit the width of that portion of the extension of the proposed driveway to 10 to 12 feet. Third, we'd request that the clearing required for that extension of the extension of the driveway be limited to just what is necessary to construct that extension, being 10 to 12 feet or just a limited area surrounding that portion so that it's not severely interfering or impacting my client's property. The fourth condition would be to limit or prohibit the parking of any vehicles by the applicant or any of their agents, including but not limited to construction vehicles, on that portion of the extension of the driveway so that it's not interfering with any access. and also on the portion of the existing road of Telegraph Hill Road, which is located on my client's property, so that my clients aren't their access is not interfered. The final request would be to also prohibit any buyer of Telegraph Hill Road from altering the existing way of Telegraph Hill Road, which is located on my client's property, unless such alteration is necessary to access their property. So those would be our requests as far as any conditions being imposed if the request is determined to be adequate.
Thank you. We did receive your letter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Hi, my name is Martha Pendergast. I'm a listing broker for Joe Giovanni, who is the current owner of the lot, the widow of Mr. Giovanni, who was the person behind purchasing the lot in 2004. But I do have some information that corresponds to the last speaker regarding the way and the access. And I don't think that this large version of the map is available digitally. So I just want to do my best to try and point out that, in fact, last year, the abutter, the Longnecker property, had unfortunately a water main pipe burst. And in order to put a new pipe up to their home, they cleared on this side, not where the proposed driveway is, but the opposite side. It already has been cleared. And the whole front of this lot fronts on the way. Again, this is not the best depiction of the lot in relation to the way, because it would also show that in addition to lot 11, which is the subject property, next to it is lot 12. They have been allowed to put a parking tray, lawn, and pavement in that right-of-way. So even though the previous speaker said that they put in a condition to not allow those things, they in fact did allow them for the abutting lot, number 12. So I just wanted to point that out. And it is in fact already cleared, other than plants which have in the last year been, installed in the front of this lot, in the way, in effect blocking the way, as well as some fairly large boulders. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? You sure? Okay, board members. Jim?
How much frontage does this lot have on Telegraph Hill Road? I think we just heard testimony, in order to get to it, they have to use a right-of-way to get to the road. How much actual frontage does it have on Telegraph Hill? Does it meet the current frontage requirement?
It technically does not have frontage on Telegraph Hill. It has frontage on a right-of-way, which is owned by the adjacent property owner.
So it doesn't have any frontage on Telegraph Hill?
It does in relation to the A&R that was approved, as Attorney Leverts mentioned, in 1966, I believe. So that A&R determined frontage along that easement, or that right-of-way.
So that frontage was determined by, they don't really own it, but they have the right to use it.
Correct. So in terms of frontage, it has frontage and it is allowed usage of Telegraph Hill Road.
I understand they have a right-of-way, but when I measure lots in the town records, you have to put in the frontage when you list the property for sale.
Yep.
If you listed this property for sale, would you list it for 0 frontage?
No, I think the measurement is 72.5 feet.
And they
give or
own
take.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
If I may, I believe, to answer your question, Mr. Fox, I wouldn't confuse the way with the way that is constructed. The way is right here. I mean, you're looking at pavement, but the way is here. This whole area is the right-of-way. You understand? The right-of-way.
Does it say that? On that plan there, I don't think it does. Doesn't that block line?
It says it right here.
But that's not what we're talking
I
about.
think it's certainly, well, bear with me here.
Can you see something that shows that? That'd be great.
I think that,
I think
that's,
we have-
that's
yeah,
not the,
assessors-
that's not the
Our
subdivision.
GIS
plan.
map may have it. We should call it up and see it, so we, instead of a hypothetical
Can we
thing, we
pull
should
up
see
the
exactly what we do have.
The division plan?
That's right here.
Can you actually go to the town GIS map and bring up the lot so we can see the town right away?
So the issue with the GIS is that it doesn't actually show this property line here.
Oh,
So right now, the GIS is showing this entire parcel as one unit. Sorry, I'm trying to negotiate this. So using the GIS isn't a great resource, but
it just doesn't help this argument.
this A&R plan that was approved in 1966 indicates frontage along this section right here, actually to this point right here, which would allow this lot to have access to the way and then eventually Telegraph Hill Road.
Mr. Fox, may I approach the board for a moment?
But who will own that?
Clearly, would even show, would even clarify it better for you. All right?
Yeah.
Here's a clear.
Here's your way, and there's your.
So
front-
you're
there's your
saying
front.
this whole thing is the way?
I'm saying that entire thing is the way, yes.
So,
This whole thing is the way, but this is the way it's constructed. This is a right of way.
this whole thing's a right-of-way?
Correct.
Everything here is all a right-of-way?
That's exactly
So
right.
how wide is this right, so then so it has frontage on the, at this point, the street's what, 70 feet wide, is we saying?
Yes,
Not the
because
street.
The way.
up in here, there's a 40-foot right-of-way.
And so he's saying this continues to become 70 feet here?
This is a semantic thing.
No,
They have
this is
40
the
feet.
72 right here.
No, but if we just heard testimony that this is the way here, and this is the way here. If this is 40, this looks like 70. Are we saying that's a 70-foot way, or is it just, okay, I don't see it, but whatever.
Regardless, it met that first standard of
In
having
1960.
the right-of-way in 1966, through that A&R process. So tonight, excuse me, Mike.
Okay, sorry.
Tonight is about the adequacy of the width of the travelway, as well as the suitability of the grades and the construction. So those are the three elements that you, as a board, as we were just discussing with Frederick Road, those are the elements that
How wide
you're
is that
looking at.
travel way that we're determining has access? That's what I'm having a problem with,
The actual traveled
that
surface,
we're saying has adequacy.
so that ranges anywhere between 12 and 14 feet.
Okay,
And to be even clearer, so let's do this just to make sure everyone understands.
I don't believe it was in dispute that is the way, Mr. Fox, it's just not the constructed way.
so when you read the deed, it refers to, no one has the fee of that land, that,
I have my client's deed.
so do they own the center of the way? It just seems to be an
The
extraordinary
neighbor
one.
owns
Doesn't
it.
show the same
They
thing we
don't
have
own it.
here.
They don't even own it.
They don't own it.
That particular dimension says, north 33, 1030 east, by a way as shown on a plan, that other plan being the plan.
And how wide is that way?
It doesn't describe, it just says by the way, it doesn't describe the way itself, the way is on the plan.
And the right-of-way is 40 feet wide, the actual right-of-way.
We've done, my office has done extensive title research on this, and it's.
Need to come to the mic, please?
We've determined that Ms. Longnecker and Mr. Laney own the fee in that entirety of that parcel, and that the right-of-way is they just have rights to pass and repass over my client's property.
So,
So could I restate what I think you just said?
Yeah,
What has been referred to right here as the right-of-way is the property of the neighbors whom you represent.
yes,
And the owner of the property lot 11, has some sort of right to go across your owner's land to reach the road.
that is correct.
So the lot 11 doesn't touch the road anywhere, but it touches the 40-foot limit of the right-of-way which your owners own, right?
That's correct. If I'm understanding you correctly,
That might have been good in 1962, but that's a very odd thing. Has anyone else on the board ever heard of that circumstance? No.
Madam Chair, if I may, so I did consult with Frank Duffy on this issue, and the indication is because it was approved as an A&R, it essentially still stands. An A&R is not subject to any sort of time limit or years of expiration. It was determined in 1966 as having adequate frontage, and therefore it still has adequate frontage today. That was the indication I got from.
I don't even think the abutter's challenging that. I think she's, I believe, and she can certainly speak for herself, I think she's simply saying, she acknowledges we have rights over the way to get to our lot. I think what she's saying is we want to have a say in just how much you develop that area to access the lot. I believe that's what she's saying. I don't think they're challenging our right to access the lot.
No, we don't dispute the right to access, but we do want a say in how that access is made, because it is made through our property.
Yeah, I think we understand.
Thank you. If the board would, we've done some title research on the right-of-way, if the board would like any type of written documentation related to that.
No, I think that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone on the board? Any comments? What's your inclination?
It appears to be a legal issue. So I think speaking with town council would be the way to go on this.
Okay, Jim?
Well, I think there's a solution here. If in fact town council says that the A&R stands because it was approved, then we're not going to be challenged by the next person coming up and said, well, you just approved a right-of-way across a piece of land that we don't even have frontage on, and then we're getting it, holding it applied. I could go along with that if the finding is that the A&R that was approved 40 years ago has standing and we have no right to touch it, then I'm okay. But I don't want to set a policy as this is what we're going to do by our present practices, saying you don't even have frontage anymore, just get a right-of-way in front it and away you go.
Well, it's not.
Because I don't believe the street has access at all, but the buildability, if it was approved 40, 50 years ago, if that's, and we have no right to change that, then I'm all set with letting that go. Because then then the next person 2 weeks from now won't come in and say, well, when you were up on Telegraph Hill, you approved, what we just did now, because that's what everyone's gonna do. Everything we do now, because we're no longer going by our policy, is gonna be on past practices. And we're going further and further and further, wider and wider, and deeper into a hole. But if the coverage is that the A&R can't be changed, then I think we can move with this going forward.
So we just need to look at what the width should be and how that affects the
And get it
neighborhood.
safe, yeah.
Well, we have 3 items here on our staff report where the standard hasn't been satisfied and would need to be worked on. Is that right?
I believe so, yes. I mean, in terms of the right-of-way, I think they've satisfied that requirement. The first item on the determination of access policy. In terms of site distance, technically there was no site distances laid out for us or any measurements done. So that's why I indicated that it was partially satisfied, only because I did a site visit. I am not an engineer, but I didn't notice any site distance issues at the proposed driveway and/or at the intersection of Blacksmith Shop Road. In relation to the slope of the road, again, no measurements were provided to indicate what the actual slope of the road is. I think if you, visited the site on the western side of the loop, you would know that the slope is significant because you really have to climb a hill to get up there. But on the eastern side of the loop, it's moderate. I don't believe the slope to be a significant issue. Maximum grade at the driveway and at Blacksmith Shop intersection. Again, none of those measurements or any of the documentation was provided, so we're just weighing it against what the standards of the policy say and what we received. And then the last item is the width of the road. So as you see in your staff report, the engineering division went out, did some measurements of the road. It's a big loop, and the width varies depending on what side of the loop you're on. The western, or I should say the eastern side of the loop appears to be anywhere between 12 feet to 10 feet wide. And in fact, in front of the subject property or just up the street, it's approximately 14 feet 9 inches. So it's quite wide down at the southern end of the loop. Now on the western side of the loop, it's anywhere between roughly 12 feet to 14 feet. And on that side, There's pavement coming up the hill to where the water tower used to be. That pavement's in pretty rough shape. Whereas down at the southern end of the loop, the pavement's in really nice shape. So it's sort of a mixed bag on what the condition of the roadway is for Telegraph Hill. And so one of the questions I have for the board is, when you're determining what the access would be, would you be considering the entire loop, or would you just be considering one side of the loop for this subject property? That will sort of help me move forward with determining what that width might want to be.
Logically, wouldn't you have to consider the whole loop, considering you can have a dead-end road longer than 500 feet? You need to use both the entire loop to prevent it from being a too long dead end.
Potentially. I guess I would ask if you were permitted, the neighborhood to weigh in on how that roadway is used. Is it used as a one-way circulation, or is it used as a two-way sort of, bidirectional roadway? Because if it's just a one-way circulation, then yes, to your point, then in theory, they'd be using the entire loop to access their property. If it's two-way, then potentially it's just the east side of the loop that is really in question here.
I just want to point out, I've lived here my whole life. In 1960, we used to allow dirt roads, town roads, so you only had to make 20 feet wide, or even 15 feet, didn't have to be paved. And we used to spray black tar on them over the sand, so that the road hold together. And I guess we're saying now that since we did that in 1966, we're going to have to continue to do that all the way through forward and not start improving things. Because that's really what we're saying here, if we're going to hold to this standard. Because I grew up on a road that was dirt for most of my life, but it was a 40-foot right-of-way. But it eventually had to be paved and widened, and now it's a fully paved road. And sooner, we talk about having access for sidewalks, for people that can, that need handicapped access to get in, and all these other things we're supposed to do. It all goes down out the drain when you have a 10-foot right-of-way. So, well, I'm just saying, what I'm worried about is because this was approved, 50, 60 years ago, that we're going to be held to that standard, then a lot of the decisions I've made on this board really shouldn't have been made, because we have really changed a lot of things. And maybe we should rethink a lot of different things based on the way we're going right now.
Sure.
So, Ben Carson at 29 Telegraph Hill. I'm on the west side, dangerous side, but, and I see a lot of our neighbors are here now. Pretty tight-knit little area. We've been there, my family, 15 years now. We got summer people, we have retirees, there's families with little kids. I think when you guys made your policy, it was in good faith and certainly applies to probably 90% of stuff happening in Falmouth. The planner said, you gave yourself an out with this stuff, and that last section that says you can waive it is the common sense clause. It says, if you have you guys all driven up there?
No, I haven't.
Okay. You cannot widen this road to 20 feet. You would take, I can't imagine it. You would remove trees that have been there for 100 years. There's stone walls that have history. It's just not feasible. There is no way. I would almost say, really, without getting crazy, there's no amount of money that you're going to put into this to fix it. And it's perfectly adequate for how we use it. It's a very small little area. Other than garbage and delivery trucks, there's hardly any traffic. We've had fire trucks, we've had ambulances, they've all gotten there. I think I don't see you have to redo everything. You already have it. You have your out. It says you can waive this. It doesn't, I'm just looking at the common sense of it. It's just, I don't see how it would be possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you going to add something we haven't heard?
One little anecdotal comment. I too am a lifelong resident of the town. We have plenty of places in town where these situations exist. And my experience is the neighbors like it that way. They don't want all of a sudden build the road out to modern day specs and pave it and put a yellow line down the middle of it. This is where they like it. I can think of many places around town that have situations like this. So I think the blanket policy is problematic.
One thing I did want to bring in and surface, because you folks are going to make a decision on what needs to happen or however the process carries forward, but I believe this lot right here is the town of Falmouth property, right? So it's touching on the east and on the west side quite a bit. And so if you're, whatever requirements you're looking at, is that something that the town of Falmouth would contribute to? Or is that something that you just put on the onus on the lot 11?
That's an interesting question.
How big is that parcel? It's town property. I'm just wondering, could that end up being a housing development? The town owns it. Could they do something with it? And is it multiple acres? And what are we talking about
Better
here?
off selling it.
What?
They'd be better off selling it.
Well, just like Lewis Neck, the housing people found a way to take a little teeny lot and put 4 houses on it when they said they're only going to do 1.
So currently, it's just owned by the town of Falmouth.
And how large is it?
Looks like it was, all right, via tax title. And the size is 1.29 acres.
And for reference, the lot we did on Lewis Neck, how that now is 4 houses that we said that they said it would only be 1 was what size?
That was just
Half
over an
this.
acre.
Just, was it over an acre?
I think so, yeah.
So it's for similar size.
Yeah, same size.
So they could sell this to the housing, put 4 or 5 units up there, and we've already determined that the right-of-way is adequate, and away they go.
Well, you keep saying that. We haven't. That's what we're,
Okay, I'm just pointing out that this is a really good parallel to what happened on
It is.
Lewis Neck.
it is. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Hykaris, and I've been giving this policy a lot of thought, and I just wanted to share a perspective with Jim with some of your comments. And I haven't really heard much discussion about something that the audience has brought up about the onus, the economic, very costly time and money that this policy is placing upon people that are coming before you. And I understand the safety concerns and how that's very much a priority. And so I'm going to say something that's probably not very popular, would not make me popular with the rest of the Falmouth residents. But I think as you're reevaluating this policy, I think you should consider that maybe a more equitable way to look at it would be to do an assessment of all these private roads and apply betterments as improvements might need to be made. And I think that you can think of it in terms of the sewer projects in town, right? You didn't start making people, when they wanted to build on one of these properties, they have to pay for sewer for the whole street. You've applied the betterment to the whole area. So I think that it's very relative to this.
That's an interesting idea. So you're thinking that the town should set up a fund of some sort for betterments on old roads?
If it's truly a safety.
If it's truly a safety issue,
That would be a great way to look at it.
good point.
What's going on?
You have a question back there?
Just, yes, would you?
One more thing to add.
Supposed to go over
Come
here?
forward.
Thank you. So up in this subdivision, that, this being Lot 11, the abutting property, Lot 12, that also has, benefits from having access to that right-of-way. Just for a point of reference, according to the town assessor's map, the property assessment, Lot 12, which is number 65 Telegraph Hill Road, was built in 1992. So that was approved for development in 92. So that is an early, a more recent precedent than going back to the original subdivision plan.
One is 50 years old and one is 30. Okay, thank
So
you.
so 65 Telegraph Hill, the abutting property, lot number 12.
Right, 30 years ago. Any other public comments? No? From the board? I think what we're asking, where did you go? There you are. Asking you to do is to work with Jed. There are a couple of things, survey information that's missing, and give us a chance to straighten out how we want to approach this, because we're not of one mind at this time. So that rather than calling a vote when we have inadequate information on it, we're going to get some legal advice. If you could please wait till our next meeting, which is February 8th.
Madam Chair?
Oh, I'd also like to say we received several letters dealing with water pressure. Not our purview. You've already heard the issues that we deal with, and that's not one of them. John?
While they're taking this time, could they also speak with Jed regarding the issues that the butter brought up concerning widening their driveway to 10 feet or 12 feet? And
Yes.
try to get that resolved before they come back in front of us?
Yes, but that would not be with Jed. That's really, it might be, but
Well,
the
I mean, they need to consider construction vehicles, cement mixers.
we do.
So, I mean, they should take that into consideration when they come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it isn't unprecedented that neighbors have chipped in to improve the road on their own. They did that at Lewis Neck.
Yes, they did. It's not unprecedented at all. Town's been here for, what, 400 years? There's very little that's unprecedented at this point. So
Some of these roads look like they've been here for 100 years, so.
Wait till you drive that one.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So is your intent to have me work with both applicants in between time and come forward on the 8th with a proposal?
With the applicants and with the town engineer and with the town council.
Okay. And a proposal for width and any improvements that they might be looking at doing, all of those things? Have that ready for the 8th?
Well, and any commitments they're willing to make with the neighbor who owns the land they'll be driving over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a final and best offer.
Yeah.
Very
I'm all
good.
for
Thank you.
administrative approval myself.
Chicken. Okay, next on our agenda is a public discussion, and the applicant is Nick Mirioni, who is speaking for Mr. Mirioni. This is a site plan review application.
You see the plan up there, Nick? Yep, you got it.
Thank you all for coming. Okay, here we have a site plan review application for construction of a one-bedroom rental unit above an existing garage, converting the property from a two-family to a multifamily use located at 462 T-Ticket Highway. Notices?
I'm going to have to put that on the agenda.
I know it.
Public meeting notice was published for this project on January 7th, 2022, and 35 abutters were notified by regular mail.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nick Mirioni. I'm here on behalf of Dan McClone, who's the owner of the property. And we're looking to, these are existing buildings on the site. We're looking to convert the upstairs of this unit, this garage, to a one-bedroom apartment unit, rental unit. The existing building has a three-bedroom first-floor apartment and a one-bedroom second-floor apartment. They're both occupied. The second-floor apartment is currently occupied by someone who meets the standards for affordable. We would deed restrict that unit to affordable and make this a market rate unit when it was finished over the garage.
Okay, could you speak for a moment about the issue of the property line and the turnaround on the gravel driveway?
On this here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, this space is a little too close to the property line. We need to be 5 foot minimum, and I think we're 2 foot. So we have room to move it back.
It'd be sort of a shame, it's so nicely cobbled and cleaned up.
I'm sorry?
It'd be sort of too bad to do that. It's so nicely cobbled and cleaned up. It's just in very good shape.
Yeah, we can move the cobbles, it's already there. This is existing, so.
I have a question. This is not an accessory apartment. What we're doing is a site plan review for three houses on one lot where one of them's affordable, and that's a use that's allowed in general residential. Is that what we're talking about?
Correct, technically 3 units.
So there's no restriction on it being 800 square feet or all the other things that we do.
Correct.
So we're really, right now, our conversation should be focused on site plan review, on parking and privacy, and that's about, and safety, and that's about it.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to understand.
I think the other reason we're here is because there is no vehicle in place right now to manage that affordable unit. So I think that they have determined that the planning board, through site plan approval, designates it as an affordable unit, and
You're right, because I built 3 of these, and they actually took away, the ZBA took away the requirement for it being affordable, because I didn't have I had it approved by Housing Assistance Corporation, but I didn't have an ongoing policy to have it checked on all the time, and they actually let the affordability go away, so what I built as an affordable unit and could only sell for $100,000 was changed to be a market rate unit, and the owner got a windfall, because our bylaw had a flaw in it because it didn't go on continuously. So I have a lot of information about this bylaw that some of you may not know. But he's 100%. If I think the ZBA will put the deed restriction on one of you'll decide
I
what
don't think
unit
it's
it
the
is.
ZBA. It would have been
Does?
Carla Ferroni, and I've already spoken with
Okay,
Peter
so we will
Johnson
decide.
Staub, and I believe Jed has also. Peter, until we get a replacement for Carla, Peter's going to handle that part of it.
My understanding is this is a by right use. Okay,
Yes.
right, that's, and general residential, it's multifamilies allowed, it's 3 of them, if one of them is designated affordable and it's been modified subsequently, that goes on for perpetuity and somebody's assigned to monitor that. And that's, I'm sorry, but that's what we're doing. I thought this was an accessory apartment thing for a while. I understand.
Very good summary. You are correct.
I built them, so I think I have some knowledge of it. I'm in favor of it.
John, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I'm just a little confused. We're supposed to select an agency also?
They have to pick somebody.
I'm asking a question, Jim.
I'm sorry.
That's what he started to say, but then he wasn't able to finish. I'm not sure I'm a little confused on it, that's all.
I am too, as to what exactly we are supposed to do.
So we would propose in your staff report that a condition be read that the applicant chooses or engages with the third-party monitoring agent and markets the unit, basically handles everything that's related to getting it onto the subsidized housing inventory for the town.
Not the unit we're talking to approve, it's an existing unit, correct?
It is.
We have to deed restrict one of the units.
Right.
It's
We
not an
would
existing
select the
unit.
one that's existing.
But isn't the front unit already there? Didn't you say that that's a 2-family there, and the front unit is the one you propose to be deed restricted, and it's occupied now? I thought I heard you say that.
Yes, the second floor of this is a 1-bedroom unit that's occupied now.
And that's the one they're gonna put the deed
by a person with a
restriction on.
voucher, so
Not the
they
one we're
qualify.
approving.
So my understanding was that the deed restriction was going to be on the one above the garage?
No.
No, well, I may have mentioned that to you, Jed, but this one already has a vouchered tenant in there, and we would prefer to just convert that to
Very
the
good.
deed restricted unit. And we need to create that deed restriction, get it approved through Peter right now, because in Carla's absence, or until there's a replacement, to create that deed restriction in perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
And we do this through conditions that we put on our approval here, and we've already been given a draft for that,
Okay.
that describes what the deed restriction is, what the covenant is, and so forth. So the material that we were given, were we to say, yes, this is a good use, it's already there, it involves no change, the parking is adequate. There was a little bit of a question about the parking, and these other conditions that if you were to prepare us a motion that includes these conditions, we will have accomplished what you need.
Yeah,
Thereabouts. So there's open questions in relation to the engineering review. One of those items is what you were just referring to, the parking spot number 6 being, and potentially number 5, although we need to see a measurement, how close they are to the property line, because they have to be 5 feet off the property line. And then there's an open question about the need for parking space number 6, because that's in the front setback, as it's described for Route 28 is 35 feet. So technically, the change in use would only trigger a need for 5 parking spaces. But if the applicant wants to keep the 6th, they may need to seek ZBA relief. That's an open question that we're sort of consulting with the building commissioner on. Because again, it's in that front setback area. So that's item number 2, and then engineering called out the need for, or the potential need for, a landscaping plan, as noted in our zoning bylaw, section 240, 14.3b. And so those are open items for the board's discussion tonight as to whether or not you want them to do those modifications.
Okay, so I went over to take a look at it. I drove over to your property today.
I'm having trouble hearing you, please. Thank
I
you.
went to take a look at your property today and drove into the driveway that is off a 28A, right off the road.
28.
And I have a question for you. Do people in practice actually use that? Because you'd think they would park off of Homestead.
They do.
Out in the back. Because backing up back onto 28A would be a problem all the time.
Right now, because we only have 4 people in the building, they're using the parking spaces out here.
Right.
When we put the other unit in, we're assuming someone's going to park here so they can back out and make the turn to go face first forward onto 28, not back out onto 28. That would be too dangerous.
Right, it would be. Are you picturing making any kind of changes there at the front in order to make that easier to do?
Well, we think it's easy to do now. Dan McClone, the owner of this, owns a pretty big pickup truck, and he does it all the time with it.
Anyway, right.
No
Who owns the
trouble.
property immediately next to it? The one that goes up to the
There's
traffic
none
light?
here.
Yeah,
No owner there.
no owner.
No, it's
That's a
a,
road.
It's not a road. When you're over there,
no, it's,
It's
I can
grass.
scroll to that, can't I, Jed?
Yep, just scroll down. Are you looking for the GIS?
I'm looking just to show the,
So it's the last tab up on the top. Yep.
okay. No, this is prime property.
But now you have to travel to that site.
Could use a little help here, Jed.
it's a triangular piece, and it's grassed over, and it has a big cedar tree on it,
Oh, I see, you're doing it off the GIS.
right
I
at the
thought
end
you
of the
had it.
gravel of his driveway.
I think I'm real familiar with it.
You must be. It's right on the corner there.
I parked in this piece of land before.
Oh,
My daughter ran out of gas. The car was left there, and I had to go
ah,
get it there. This was years ago, but I know right where it is.
there it is. You see where it comes off of the T-Ticket Highway
Yep.
and goes up to Homestead? Oh,
Well, that-
there. Now you
Okay,
can
so
see
they,
it.
all that,
It's
all
that
that, who owns all
field.
that land there?
Yeah,
Click on it.
462C.
If you click on it, that should tell who the owner is. And the owner should be listed. It looks like it's your
all
land.
owned by the same person.
Looks like it's all your land. Isn't it? The owner should be, I can't read it, but doesn't
Yeah,
it?
that's what it
Yeah,
looks like.
it's all one owner.
So they own it.
then
I'm not sure that that's the correct scale, so we may want to just take a closer look at the site plan that they've got.
I think what they really need to give us is a proposed site plan showing what the paving's gonna be, where the driveway's gonna be, the turnaround.
We have that here.
they have it. They can
Everything's
leave
right
it
here.
right where it is.
I thought,
You have it in your package.
I know, but I thought they said it was showing it was only 2 feet and they're gonna make it 5 feet. Is that?
Right in the
One of the parking spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One of the 6.
Actually, I think that might be a zoning line. No, the zoning line's the red.
The red, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's
We're
got
on
it,
a property line.
And this is
So
what
we have no
Falmouth
trouble
Engineering gave
moving
to us.
that parking space, moving the two parking spaces so we're 5 feet off the line.
Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think that the landscaping is existing. I think what they have there is fine. And I think if they eliminated that parking space and have 5, which is all they need, then there's not an issue if it's being too close to the property line or anything. They don't have to go back to the zoning board of appeals for this. And I think we could just approve this.
I think that we can, but I want to say, the landscaping is actually very good. There's no need to do anything further. As we saw when we were looking at the photograph down, the aerial, it's got big trees on it, it's green, it's fine, and it's very well cared for. And now it turns out that what we're treating as a property line isn't. So he doesn't need to remove, he doesn't need to change anything that's there.
And I'm fine with that.
me too.
Okay, are we good with it? Mm-hmm. Okay,
I
then.
just have one question, though, regarding the oversight of the affordable unit. Can we vote to approve this for him to get a building permit before he has someone to oversee that, or will that be during the process?
I don't know.
May I say something on that?
I think that they should be able to
Mr.
build it.
Marioni, do you know the
I
answer to
could,
that?
I could make a
I do.
proposal that he gets it before he gets an occupancy permit.
I like that idea.
In my
That's what I had to do.
discussion with Peter Johnson Staub, we agreed that we couldn't get a certificate of occupancy until we had that in
Right.
place.
Okay, so we're all on the same page on that. Do you want that in the conditions?
Yes, that should be a condition.
Ted, you caught that part?
Got it.
Okay,
So
so,
he's gonna give us a motion, a positive motion.
we're
for our
going to
next
ask
me-
for that.
For our next meeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you prepare a positive motion with these conditions, adding on to the occupancy permit, pause, so.
Could we just clarify the total number of parking? Is it your intent that you'd like to see only 5, or is the 6 that being in that front
Six.
setback?
6 is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
If he's willing.
Does that mean they have to go back to the zoning board of appeals, though?
Like I said, it's an open question with the building commissioner right now, because technically, the principal structure doesn't meet the setback from the street.
Okay, wait a second. When that happens, though, that means it's automatically a special permit by the ZBA. We can't stop it. Any change, I don't mean to talk like a zoning expert, but anytime you do a change to a pre-existing non-conforming use,
That's up to Mr. Gore to decide.
well, the ZBA has to,
That's Mr. Gore's decision.
he can decide.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're just
that's
doing
what Jim
site.
just said. Mr. Gore's going to make that decision.
Okay.
So-
I thought it was required a special permit from the ZBA. you should check on that. I think it does.
Right, so we are,
I'm still in favor of it. I'm just saying, I think we have a technicality that this is gonna go to the ZBA no matter how hard we
That
try.
doesn't change what we're doing.
No, I agree.
It does not. Okay, so I think we're done?
Why do you think we need to go to the ZBA for the 6 parking space?
No. Any change, in my experience, I'm only going by what I've done, that if you have a special permit on a property, any building permit you get requires a new special permit from the ZBA.
We don't have a special permit. This is a
So
by
when you
right. This is,
modify a
this,
pre-existing non-conforming structure, it automatically triggers a ZBA. I'm
but
giving legal advice here.
we're not modifying the use. This is an allowed use in that zone.
Doesn't matter.
So what we have is a prior non-conforming setback
Mhm.
that we're not changing, and we have an allowable use in that zone when we go from 2-family to multifamily.
correct.
So there's
Well,
no
let's see what
special.
the experts say. I
That's-
believe it requires a special permit from the ZBA.
So we'll ask
What's the
Eladio, we'll get the answer to that question, and then in relation to the parking, everyone seems to be okay with that 6th spot in the
Yep.
front?
Yep.
Okay.
Eladio's only here the end of the month.
I thought he already,
I thought it was end of last month.
yeah.
Yeah, it was just
Going on
made
tomorrow,
public,
we'll fill it.
the end of the month.
It was extended
Oh.
another 30, he got a 30-day extension.
Wherever the building commissioner is,
Correct.
whoever it is, that
Correct.
person will make the determination.
But we've done what we need to do, so thank
Yeah.
you, Mr. Marioni, and.
So how do we leave this tonight? I'm a little confused. How do we
That's
leave
done.
it?
We're going to approve this. We have asked for an approval to be prepared with the suggested conditions that you already knew about and you had a copy of, and adding on only on paper the business about the occupancy being settled beforehand.
Yes.
So that's the only change.
Okay.
So you're all set, but we don't actually vote until February 8th.
Okay, so it's, you voted to approve, but it's not really approved till the next meeting.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now have 4 items for discussion. And the first of these, that people have been waiting for a long time, is, but I don't, is Coastal Resiliency presentation by Charles McCaffrey. And I think we already all had a copy of the report, but what Mr. McCaffrey has done is prepared a special report for us to focus on what it is the planning board can and should do. Oh, Mr. McCaffrey.
Notices?
Hmm?
Notices?
Do we have a notice?
You're pulling your leg.
Just trying to rattle you.
Did you put, I don't know, a copy of the resiliency plan?
Take this off because
Okay,
my glasses will fog and I...
right.
Good evening. I'm Charles McCaffrey. I'm the former chair of the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee. The committee finished its charge in June and presented the Select Board with a report with numerous recommended actions. In going through those actions, there are quite a few that are primarily the responsibility of the Planning Board, and a few others that you would have a role in, even if not the primary responsibility. How do I move this?
You could just use the arrow button and just go straight down.
I can't. Oh. Good. Okay, that I can see. I think one of the first points to make is that in addressing resiliency, and let me say in brief, we're talking about resiliency to 3 major types of activities. 2 of them are sea level rise, which is going to be the gradual permanent inundation of large areas of town. Much of that will not occur where it's 24/7 of water on the site until later in the next 50 years. In 40 to 50 years, we'll really be seeing actual areas of upland being permanently underwater, becoming permanently underwater lands. The other major concern that we need to be resilient is major storms. We've always had that issue. The 38 hurricane, the 44, the 54, even Hurricane Bob. But a Category 3 hurricane at any time, and it could happen at any time, is going to be devastating to many areas of the town. We have experienced significant development since the last Category 3, which was Carroll in 1954. So though these issues, and the third is that gradually flooding of all types will gradually increase. In other words, we won't all of a sudden have sea level rise and permanent inundation. There will be more and more frequent flooding, either from sea level rise or a combination of sea level rise, nor'easters, other storms. So flooding is going to be a fact of life, and it's going to continually to get worse over the next 50 years till we ultimately have areas, large areas of land that are seaward, seaward, what is land now will be seaward of high tide. So in all these, although these are interrelated, you need to keep them, the distinctions, in mind as you're thinking of various strategies to address them. The recommendations for everyone fell into 7 categories. I think it's very important that we understand that resilience means addressing the problem
from a wide range of actions. These are administrative actions, regulations, actual physical projects, education, policy adoption, planned redevelopment, and further research. We've got to be doing all of those things for a wide range of purposes. Let me come first to administrative actions. I think in many ways, I know the committee felt this. The most important recommendation at this point in time is adding expertise to town staff. We can talk about one position for the planning board or one position in conservation or a shared, but that's small. We need to really think how the town, in the way it addresses its physical and economic development, is integrating consideration of resiliency in all relevant decisions. So that relates, and we'll ultimately need more than one staff person, and we may need to get a more integrated organization as to how the town addresses development. I won't get into details, but all of you have some ideas on that subject. So we need to assure that actions are evaluated for consistency with policy. We recommended that, and fortunately, I wore two hats. I was also on the charter review, and I pushed, and the charter review has been amended to require that the select board adopt procedures to assure the consistency of town actions with the local comprehensive plan, the strategic plan, and any other formally adopted policies of the select board. That's going to be a serious way in which decision-making can be modified. So those are the key administrative actions. Regulations, which is the recommendation that most falls within your purview. The first one, adopt an official projection for sea level rise. And the one we've used that based on the state DOT is 4 feet. We can expect 4 feet of sea level rise by 2070. Just your discussion, this is, having a standard. We need a standard and not have it debated and discussed and everyone bring in their own scientists to say, this is the projection of sea level rise on my property. No. Though it's subject to some debate, it's the most reasonable standard. It's adopted by the state. It should be periodically reviewed. But the town should adopt that as what it expects and what its official projection is. And that would be the projection that would be used in decision-making, whether it's for paving a road or approving a subdivision. The restrict new development in the V zone. You've probably discussed that. It's a difficult step, but it's been done in many communities. Most of the development has already occurred, but at least it would be that if it's destroyed in a storm, it wouldn't be allowed to be rebuilt. We can talk about taking in a minute, but I think that's not an uncommon standard, and you can justify in such a hazardous area very limited development. The other, and we do that, we want to do that now because in a category 3, which could come at any time, many, if not majority of houses in the V zone are going to be significantly damaged or utterly destroyed, and the material is going to be strewn about, creating a hazard for everyone. There are other reasons for that, but I won't go into them. There's a lot of literature on doing that type of regulation. More novel would be, since we now have maps of where we expect the high tide line to be in 2070, should we be approving development if we know it's ultimately going to be underwater? On the other hand, it's not for 40 or 50 years that it's going to be in danger. So why prevent it when there's many years of use that could be available? So the committee recommended that we do phase out development projected to be below the high tide line by 27. What the concept that I think could be helpful here would be amortization. It does exist in land use. It's usually not applied to major development. It's often applied to things like billboards or temporary structures. But there's no legal reason why it couldn't be applied to what we're mostly dealing with is residential development. So that somebody wanted to build a house, and we know this is a likely area to be permanently inundated, they would be given a building permit that's good for 30 years. They would have to post a bond to cover the cost of removal. And the date for removal could be 30 years, or it could be a performance standard that is, say, 5 years prior to official projections of the site being inundated. There's a lot to work out in that, but that's a useful thing. I know California has been doing that with some things like seawalls. Okay, you get the seawall, you're really in danger, but it has a fixed life. Following that, it must be removed and cannot be replaced. And that's something that I think the town should also do, but I think that that regulation will probably fall primarily, or should, with the Board of Selectmen in their use of special permit for wetlands under the zoning law. That's a very broad authority that is not well used, and because it's under the zoning and a special permit, it has a great deal of flexibility in applying it. Say, for example, now, if we knew a revetment was really harmful in the movement of sediment that's feeding a beach, but the property was built before 1978 under the wetlands law and state regulations, you couldn't deny them a hard structure to protect their property. Only property built after 78 can be denied hard structures. But if they need a special permit under the zoning law, that standard, that grandfathering that the state put into the wetlands law wouldn't be relevant. We will have to do a lot more study on the movement of sediment to establish the basis, particularly for denying rebuilding seawalls, or if we're going to prevent a house that's already there from having a seawall. But there will be situations where it's the critical thing to do if we're going to preserve our beaches. So in general, the next one is standard setbacks. Look at your land use regulations. Look at the siting of the house, considering flooding potential. So if the high spot, say, is nearer the setback line, maybe you waive the setback line in favor of siting something higher up so it's not experiencing the frequent and increasing flooding that we'll experience over the next many years. I know I've worked with communities on the waterfront, and rather than a minimum setback from the road, often the road, the house, the water, it was a maximum setback. In other words, if it's an area of erosion, you want the property that's built to be as far from the eroding shoreline as possible, so there's less need or reason to do that. So you might establish that 25 feet is the maximum setback from the road, not the minimum. I'm just giving examples, but it needs to be taking a look at them from that perspective of the land use regulations. And an important one, recommendation, and I know you've discussed its potential for use by the town, is the transfer of development rights. I think the best way to see how that would use is that we're going to lose a lot of homes to storms and sea level rise. Actually, our consultant, Woods Hole Group, identified 849 homes that will be seaward of the high tide line by 2070. Where can we provide land for them to move to? I'll take the example of my own neighborhood, which is among the most vulnerable. I'm in Silver Beach. Well, New Silver Beach. New Silver Beach, of course, is older than Old Silver, but that's... the consultant identified nearly 100 homes that are going to be permanently underwater. And you know where those are. It's very low-lying. It's essentially coterminous with a lot of the area that was sewered. It was sewered because the water table was so high you couldn't put in a septic system. One of the things that will happen with sea level rise, and we're seeing this already in one other area that's very threatened, is sea level will raise the water table near the shore. As the sea level rise, when you're near the shore, where it wedges underneath, it will push up the groundwater by a similar amount of, and if we're having 4 feet of sea level rise by 2070, there are many places where the groundwater is not 4 feet below the surface. But I sort of digress there. I think it's important not just to preserve houses, but think of the community. And by Silver Beach is a strong, more than 100-year-old community, many people there. There's land nearby. Relocate development that's going to be inundated to areas that are further upland. But like most of the town, it's all zone 1 acre. The houses in Silver Beach were developed at 8 or 10 units per acre. They're on 50 by 100-foot lots. And much of the town is at that density. So there's a 14-acre parcel immediately contiguous. Some of it's wetlands, so only 7 acres, say, hypothetical, it's not hypothetical, but is developable. You'd get 7 homes on the 14 acres. But if you developed it at 8 to the acre, you'd get 50. That would take care of half of the homes that are being inundated if people wanted to. They could even be literally move some of those bungalows to these new lots. And that type of development, that dense development, is what's happening in town. A lot of the most affluent new development are these small cottage duplexes that are selling for several $100,000 or $1 million. So it's not that dense development is unappealing. And as we're talking years from now, much of this will begin now, but will really happen in 30 or 40 years. It's the type of change that could preserve the community. How we make transfer development rights work, there's a lot of variations. You create a bank, the town buys it, or you leave it to the market. There are many ways to make it work. But it should be on our range of solutions to preserving communities and not just houses. Education, not primarily us, but whose is it? One of the concepts I think that is most exciting and that I think you can relate to is creating virtual reality images of future scenarios. Picture it. We see what goes on the internet and what kids do. They can create a whole reality. Let's create several scenarios of what the future will look like so that it's not a threat, but it's a future that has wider beaches, more wetlands, dunes, and denser development further inland. So I'm excited about that, but I have no idea how to do that. Policy adoption. You're considering at the moment looking at revising the policies. You have coastal hazard policies, which are fine, except for the missing one. I think I've spoken to some of you about that. You didn't include all the ones that town meeting adopted, particularly the one that it addressed that the town accepts the concept of retreat. What I'm recommending, I know you're looking at the Cape Cod Commission policies, and I'm very familiar with those. I actually, when I was on the Cape Cod, if you could put that out, I can't, the reflection is too much. Thank you. I worked on the Cape Cod, the regional plan. I was on the subcommittee that was in charge of that, and I obviously spent a lot of my time focused on the erosion policies, and they're fine. You've got good policies. There's good policies there. The state has good policies. They essentially say the same thing, but with different words. I'm recommending that you use as the basis the state policies from the Coastal Zone Management Program. You can tweak them in, but they should be recognizable. A couple of reasons for that is that already the state is legally bound to adhere to those policies in all of their decision. The federal government, through the Coastal Zone Management Act, is legally bound to adhere to that. There have been numerous cases since that act passed in 1972 that have interpreted and strengthened that program, the federal consistency concept, consistency as a basis for making decisions. And we'll have a consistency process through the procedures that the charter now calls for. There's also a lot of records, decision records, and a lot of interpretive materials that have been developed around as those policies have been applied strictly, not only in Massachusetts, but similar ones in every coastal state in the nation. So there's a lot more, how do you interpret the language? And having the same language as the state and federal government uses, I think is a real reason for basing your policies on hazards on the state coastal zone management policies. Physical projects, sort of, not that you implement them, but all of these physical projects are going to need some type of planning studies, some only just design studies. But one of the ideas that was in the report was that we could protect Town Hall here with a berm from sea level rise. Well, that's fine, but what I was struck by is that Main Street will be flooded in a Category 3 hurricane. I think it's worthwhile protecting Town Hall, the area south of Main Street, from a Category 3 hurricane. The idea would be a berm of some kind, and that would protect all of Main Street. Well, the Main Street that's most vulnerable, say from St. Barnabas, and I'm not sure how far east it would go. That depends on the topography. But that would create an opportunity to reconsider how that area south of Main Street to where a berm is ultimately sited to be redeveloped. Something analogous to your Davis Strait study, and would be integrated into constructing the berm, which would be a park and a linkage and new development that's mixed use. And we know that area just behind the buildings on Main Street is pretty random. And yet it's a great location. So I think that would be an important study and plan to develop that has integrated into it resilience. Just to let you know, relocating the sewer lines, and that's already begun for Trunk River. Amy Lowell is working on that. The data, and this will influence a lot of your decision, you're talking about roads. The consultant, we looked at every road within, well beyond, say, the floodplain, 500-year floodplain, and determined its elevation and what its risk of flooding is now in 2030, in 2050, and 2070 by every segment of road. So there's a lot of data that will be important for the Public Works Department to do, to begin to look at priorities as where can we raise roads to afford some protection. As I said, there's probably 100 homes in Silver Beach that could be vulnerable to sea level rise. Some of them, by a small increase in road elevation, could be protected. There are many places where you could protect some areas by a modest elevation of the road. We're going to have to move the bike path too, or change its character. It may be an elevated boardwalk because it is near areas that will ultimately be flooded, or it's areas where we need to allow, as sea level rises, we need to allow our wetlands to move or we'll lose them. And the bike path in some areas, particularly if you look at West Falmouth, the bike path would inhibit movement of Great Sippowisset Marsh. But we can have it as an elevated boardwalk bikeway. Planned redevelopment. This sort of repeats what I said about working with a berm to protect Main Street and integrating that into a redevelopment plan that is inherently resilient. That's true here. It's Woods Hole is beginning with the institutions, and the town is involved to look at a plan. There are places where we really do need to do major planning and redevelopment to be resilient because we can't move. We can move up, we can do some movement, but we've got so much invested in places like Falmouth Harbor, Falmouth Main Street, Woods Hole, that our approach is going to be more structural. And as we're doing that, the redevelopment that necessarily occurs should be planned redevelopment in the vein in which you've done the Davis Straits study. I might mention that when we looked at the level of risk, it was based on the existing land use, except we asked the consultant to look at your Davis Straits study and assess the risk in that. And they identified a couple of minor changes to your plans that would make it more resilient. One is where you talk about opening the water to the head of Falmouth Harbor by the Falmouth Inn there, and that would feed storm surge. So you would need a tide gate, which would not be a big hurdle. That if we were going to experience surge in the harbor, you could block it off from that area. And there are other reasons why that helps. Your concept there, I think, helps with managing all of the routine flooding that's going to keep increasing. And of course, as we know that much of this built, the Walmart, et cetera, much of that is on wetland that will be reclaimed by the sea. But there's only a small area of the new affordable housing that might need a seawall to protect it, but not significant. We did, as you're aware, we did one pilot study looking at Surf Drive, and the consultant applied an adaptive management approach where we looked at different concepts for how you might manage the area and how it would evolve over time. Because many things, we can recommend something now to protect an area, recognizing that it's maybe good for 10 years or 20 years, but it's not good in the long term. So beginning to where you have to make those shifts in planning and perspective. We divided the town into 13 neighborhoods that reflected both community character as well as the natural characteristics of that stretch of shoreline. And we very much feel that the Surf Drive study has to be replicated in each of those neighborhoods, such as the one I've talked about, Silver Beach. further research. The aspect of further research that's needed mainly centers on legal studies, planning law. As I said, development, you were talking about non-conforming uses. It seems hard in Massachusetts to have a non-conforming use eventually eliminated. But that will be necessary ultimately. But we've got time. And as we become more aware of the threat, there's going to be more and more willingness to do things that weren't done before, such as generally you can't abandon a road if it's providing service. Places are beginning to do that. Those legal principles did not envision permanent inundation of roadways when they were formulated and applied, but we will have permanently inundated roads. In the winter, frozen solid, so we're going to have to say that at some point infrastructure will be removed from areas, certain areas. I think ownership of inundated lands needs to be looked at. Many waterfront homes are, the title goes to the low water mark. Well, what happens when the low water mark is now landward of the property? The public trust doctrine says that anything that's intertidal or below water is the property of the state. If property is not removed before it becomes inundated, it becomes a source of pollution. So there are many reasons why we have to think about property that's going to be inundated has to be removed before the inundation occurs. We need to prepare that land for the sea where we can't defend it from the sea. We want the best resiliency is a wide beach, a dune, a wetland, or a bay. We can perhaps gain that as the shore evolves from sea level rise. Maybe we can have a more accessible, more natural, more attractive shoreline. I'll leave you with that thought.
Yeah, Charlie, when we were going through writing the LCP and talking about coastal resilience, we looked at living reefs and creating dunes along the South Shore here as a way to reduce the impact of storms and surge and things like that. And also something that I don't know if anybody's ever talked about, but is permeable road surfaces.
Yeah, well, they did that in Provincetown.
Yeah.
Commercial Street is now permeable.
Yeah.
And they were able to eliminate some of the catch basins, which didn't do it. They just took it, sent it in. Now it goes through the sand and through the beach and then into the water.
Yeah.
That will help with some problems. And the more living shorelines are a good solution in the shorter term, 30, 40 years, particularly in the non-dynamic shorelines. Mm-hmm. In Great Bay, Great Pond, Bourne's Pond, you can do it there. You can't do it on the open water. The surf is too strong. It's not really appropriate for most of those situations. What was the other one you meant? Well, we certainly
dunes and
nourishment is going to have to be part of our budget, a huge budget item, just as more bridges will be where we're going over low points.
Because the town I grew up in had granite breakwaters, that just piles of rocks.
Yeah.
Sections of them with breaks in between.
But
they've protected the town for almost 100 years now.
Yes, but you lose the beach.
No, well, they actually brought it back. They
brought in
sand. It moved the sand around.
But we need to understand, and some studies have been done, what is the movement of sand? As we do each of those studies for the neighborhoods, what's the sediment budget? the term they use.
Yeah.
Where is the sand? Where is it moving? What's holding it up? We can look at parts of Town Shore, and you can just see revetment, small groins, and then just downdrift of that, the beach is all eroded.
Right.
Or you see a stretch of shoreline that has a beach that people can walk on, that people have access for walking. Somebody puts in a revetment, and soon the beach is gone.
Right. And is it true that most of the sand along this stretch used to just transfer from New Seabury and Nobska, just go back and forth?
We did map out, on one of our maps, we've got, shows where it's moving, and I can't recall all of it much. But you need to know that.
Yeah.
When you do the...
And I think the Buzzards Bay Coalition called for removal of a lot of groins and jellies.
Yeah,
jetties,
so we will have to begin that, but we want to make sure we understand this, the sand that's being prevented from being in the littoral system.
Yeah.
And feeding beaches.
Yeah.
And creating bars that may soften storm waters. It's, I think it may be radical, I'm just speaking now. You know, erosion is generally, from the point of view of beaches and a natural shoreline, a good thing.
Yeah.
It's only necessary to be prevented when you plant a structure that's eroding.
Yeah.
We want, where those are, where it's a significant source of sand, we want to release it so that it feeds our beaches.
Yeah.
That's our lifeblood. We could protect the shoreline, but we'd end up with a wall and open water.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah. And
we need to do that if we're protecting Woods Hole or Main Street or some Falmouth. How about we do that?
Yeah.
But we can't do it for the 95 miles of shoreline that we have.
Yeah.
So, Charlotte?
Thank you, Charlie. That's a terrific amount of work that you've put in and that we're going to have to. I thank you for that, but I'd like to open this now to questions and comments by first the board and then everyone who is here and would like to. I know Paul served with you on your committee. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I attended all the meetings, and I appreciate your presentation tonight summarizing this. I also attended the Select Board planning session a week ago Saturday, and you did a similar type thing there. And my question really is, one of the most significant recommendations is to get a coastal resiliency team on board here. And sitting in that strategic plan, I didn't see any real people jumping up and down saying, yeah, we must do that.
Sam did.
And, huh?
Sam did.
Who?
Sam.
Sam pushed it, but I didn't see anyone else really pushing it. Do you think there's going to be funding?
I think they were aware of the need to do that. I think the board is aware of that need.
Well, I know they're aware of it. You know what happened to the previous two reports 10 years ago, but nothing happened from that.
Those reports are to the letter relevant today. We went over them thoroughly. We went through them recommendation by recommendation, and we didn't disagree with, I can't remember anything but the most minor reason. And they were particularly focused on the issue I was just talking about, and we should use them as a source for that, of how do we manage the sand and assure that the sand is free to protect our beaches and to create and to help the wetlands rise so that they're not completely inundated by sea level rise, because that's what will happen. We could have an open bay instead of the Great Sippawisset Marsh, depending on how sand may help augment the level, because though sea level has been rising and at about a foot over the last century, wetlands can move with that from sedimentation that occurs. If over the next 50 years they rise 4 feet, the wetlands don't have a chance of keeping up. Sorry, Paul. Yeah.
What I was getting at is, Do you think there's going to be funding in the proposed budget in the spring for the?
I know that there are some
resiliency?
citizens who are proposing, if it hasn't been developed already, to move forward with an initiative to add staff for this and related purposes. And what's important for that is there's so much money out there
There is.
from the state and from the federal government, even without the Build Back Better climate stuff, from the infrastructure bill, and from what the state has been using the COVID money for. There's significant money. We have data and analysis that can make us very competitive, but if we don't have staff to put it together, we'll miss out.
I have another question related to that. Your presentation today is encouraging the planning board to do something in terms of coastal resiliency. And clearly, the local comprehensive plan needs to be updated. We've talked about it. It's on the horizon, although we haven't begun looking at it. And that's one element of it. But how do you see this coastal resiliency group, or whatever it is, fitting in with the planning board and trying to get these activities going? Is that going to be their primary responsibility rather than the planning board? Or how do you see that working out?
I don't have a set,
Not
but
trying to put you on
I
the
think
spot.
the important thing is not another committee. We recommended our committee continue, but that's not the essential thing is getting staff resources, whether they're assigned to the planning board and also work for conservation or vice versa. How that's done, the administration has got to work that out. And they can't just think about one person, as I said at the beginning. We needed to restructure how decisions are made with an expansion of expertise with regard to the natural and physical development of the town.
Well, could I comment on that? It's more than, to me, I think Paul's on the right track here. We're looking for a budget item and an item of a large enough size to cover not just additional staff for the departments that will be using it, but the consultants, because the work on Davis Straits, that was done, okay, none of it's for free.
No.
Right, and in order to get the 13 additional studies that you're talking about, each of them is a separate budget item.
Yeah.
So there's all that kind of groundwork before anything else can happen.
Yes. So you should start somewhere, ask for more, ask for another position, ask for consultant funds. I know the select board was interested in the concept of a berm protecting Main Street associated with the redevelopment as part of that, as a long-range project, but we've got to begin now with the basic feasibility work.
Mm-hmm. John, did you want to speak?
I just want to ask, is there any involvement with the Cape Cod Commission in any of these studies? Are they doing their own?
They're doing a lot of work.
Because they already have
Yeah,
staff.
so there's a lot of work that we can use that they've done. I think, one thing, the Woods Hole Group did a great job in all of the data they collected. One area where we're somewhat missing is in how, over the next 50 years, we know what will flood, either from storms or from just sunshine flooding or from sea level rise. But we need more understanding of the immediate shoreline and how it will evolve in the face of storms, sea level rise, and flooding. In other words, how will the geomorphology of the immediate shoreline change? So we understand that and what we can do to facilitate improvements in the natural character as the shoreline evolves.
Jim?
I have two areas. First of all, it's so a massive view, it's hard to question everything. I'm going to focus on two areas. One in particular, the town's just about to enter into, and it sounds like your group would be opposing this, widening the Minot opening to 90 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, and it sounds like that you don't think that that would be a good idea because we'd be
Okay,
changing
we
everything.
did our committee no longer exists, so but when that came up, we formally prepared an analysis and presented it to the select board.
And what did you say about it?
Widening
This is something that's gonna happen pretty soon, isn't it?
yeah, our concern was they were adding groins. They were taking away, but they were adding.
Yeah.
And we think that the addition of the groins is a mistake. And I can go into,
Well, how about
one
the
of
widening? You're okay with making it wider, the bigger flow?
making it wider, it does seem to serve water quality purposes.
No, but when you
and
mentioned
and
Falmouth
we
Harbor, you
would
were gonna
keep,
block it off.
and we do recognize the need to keep a jetty at the mouth, but we weren't as clear about the others because we felt that the more you protected the sand on that side, as always is the case, the more it eroded downdrift. What I would say is the approach, which is that you dredge it more often. In other words, you don't try to protect it by not letting the sand go in it. You let the sand go in it, you take it out and you put it down. You're bypassing. That's the concept that you need to be thinking about. You're wanting to keep the sand moving where it wants to go.
My other question is, with this inundation of 4 feet in 50 years, what happens to the village of Woods Hole and all the oceanographic institutes, and you were talking about
They're
abandoning them and
working on
retreating
that.
from that
They-
area?
Yeah, and they looked at it, our consultant, and they've hired the Woods Hole Group, and they're looking at it. It's interesting, Water Street and the main buildings are not as vulnerable as are the areas west and north of Eel Pond.
So it's not gonna go up 4 feet higher, or they won't be inundated underwater?
Well, but you've got a hard shoreline there. You can raise it as they're raising their dock. One of the concepts,
Right.
and it's a concept at this point, and they're looking at that. So you harden the first floor, you raise the road, you put in
So you're-
walls, so you
you're not
protect
talking
it.
about retreating
You
here, you're
protect it
talking
from,
about-
you
okay.
protect it from sea level rise. You don't protect it from a storm, except through floodproofing of the buildings.
All right, but you're
Which
not
is a-
talking retreatment. I thought I heard you say you're retreating from these areas and getting out. In some areas, you'd say.
Some
staying.
areas, but I'm saying Woods Hole, Main Street, Falmouth, we
Okay.
can't,
All right, I understand. I'm in agreement.
And one of the ideas, and it's just an idea at this stage, would be to block off the access to Eel Pond from Vineyard Sound, so you can have a continuous defensive wall. And the flooding, it's going to flood from Buzzards Bay through the wetlands and others, and open up direct access, dredge access, and open it up from Buzzards Bay to Eel Pond, to a larger Eel Pond. Now, yeah, so there are ways of looking at, you've got to reimagine some of these places. But it doesn't mean we just retreat. There are some places, those very low-lying areas where it was filled wetland, it's single-family home. That, we can't protect every stretch of that. Tips of the peninsulas on the South Shore, across from the beach bathhouse. It's not going to happen overnight. People will have plenty of time and use of these properties. But I think we have to recognize that not every property can be saved. It's just too much of a physical reality, the 4 feet of sea level rise. And maybe it won't happen in 2070. Maybe it'll be 2080, but maybe it'll be 2060. It's not too soon. I mean, I remember walking on the beach 75 years ago here, so I'm not, before there were jetties at groins at Silver Beach.
Wow.
Well, and this isn't all that far away.
It
Last
isn't.
time you were talking about it.
All
you
of the
pointed out
planning
that
and work that we have to do.
depreciation goes for 30 years. And
Yeah.
this is really only 10 years beyond that,
Yeah.
starting right where we are now. You're welcome to comment if you'd like to.
No, yeah, I'll wait here.
Yeah, please stay there, because I have a few questions. I'm Eleanor Ling. I have a few questions, but first I want to say that it's really, really fantastic work here, and thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for your committee. And there's a lot of really good suggestions and options, and I have to agree with you. I mean, if we delayed implementing some of these projects in the present, we may reduce the future options for climate resiliency. And with that said, I have a few questions. For example, with the berm for, around the town hall area, does it require a feasibility study, or
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So it's not
It's just
shovel.
a concept.
Yeah, it's
a
not
concept.
shovel ready.
Right. We know that, Main Street has the potential to be affected by a major storm. We will get a major storm at some point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good goal to say, well, let's protect Main Street. We're not going to move Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that there is a relatively straightforward project that would do that. How much is included within that area? It's important. You can't go down to the shore to do it, because we want the shoreline to be able to evolve where that there are wide beaches, even if we may have to nourish them to begin with. There are dunes, there's wetlands and open water, and then there's development. That's the most resilient type of shoreline. But in Woods Hole, Main Street, Falmouth Harbor, we don't have that option. But in much of our shoreline, we do.
Yeah, thank you. Also, another question is, what do you mean by creation of taxing district? I'm very ignorant of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. We do that for sewers, taxing districts, and it's shared. It's going to be that, say, an area that is going to become isolated, and they want to do a causeway, maintain access because the land has been washed away.
Chappaquiddick Island.
I wasn't going to get specific. Well, say they wanted to build a causeway. Well, it may have some benefit to the town, but it's probably primarily doing that. You form a taxing district and they can tax themselves. Beach nourishment, I can see this happening in my community. It's a private beach, it's not a town-wide. Maybe they can form a taxing district to pay for the nourishment that will not only provide more recreation, but will provide some protection for some years. Not that it'll be permanent, but some years. So you create a taxing district so they can tax themselves. I know one community, I worked quite a bit with the town of Southampton on Long Island. Very typical, very similar to Falmouth, except it's twice as big and twice as much money. And there was one wealthy stretch of shoreline. They wanted to nourish the beach, allow the public to be on it, and they raised $25 million. But the town let them do it as a taxing district. So it was a net zero cost to the town, but they got it was part of their property, it became part of their property tax. And it also meant that everyone, as long as I don't know what it was, but say it was 2/3 had voted to participate in this district, then everyone had to. So you didn't have the recalcitrant neighbor who wouldn't cooperate. And they did $25 million worth of nourishment.
Thanks, it's really helpful. Another question I have is that a lot of these projects, a lot of these proposals really involve getting residents on board.
Yes.
Yeah, particularly like relocating their properties and so forth. Do you think that type of educational activities and outreach, community outreach, should be started soon?
It should, yes. And that's, I was talking about using virtual reality and other things to create really graphic, exciting pictures of what the option is. You could just have fallen down houses sitting in water, or you could have a new wider beach, a dune, boardwalks leading to that over open water and wetlands from new development on the higher ground. But you've got to show that,
And last question. The Woods Hole report have some type of fiscal, cost estimate.
Yeah.
And I think that Chair Harris has raised the issue about cost. And if I, let me see, if I have it written down, some of these projects for the bikeway, it's pretty expensive. For example, Elevate Bikeway on the boardwalk costs about $2 to $3 million. And other projects cost also, several $1 million. And one project costs maybe up to $10 million.
How do you do that? Well,
and my question is, what is there a fiscal analysis of how to pay for this, like municipal bonds?
No, one of the recommendations was create a fiscal plan.
Okay.
But it would involve, we have time. So what's the priority? Which stretch of the bike path should be raised first? What year do we do that? We do that in 2020. I'm just making this up. 2025. But this other stretch of a mile long, we do in 2030. Because it's not, we schedule these things out over the long term, which is the way the town manages its budget, every time, So this, but it will mean that, yes, I can't envision that we could adapt completely to coastal resiliency and sustainability aspects of other climate change impacts without raising more money locally.
That makes sense.
But I think we also know that there can be significant, as there is already, and it may grow, from state and federal. And I think one of the, people immediately are, well, if we're going to lose these houses and we have to buy them, that's expensive. Well, we wouldn't be buying houses now. We would buy them maybe when they're destroyed in the storm. We would offer transfer of development right. We would get federal subsidies to do it. A combination of things mean that we wouldn't be outlaying the present cost of a property that ultimately will be replaced by a wetland in 30 years.
Charlie, would it be fair to say that this report really is at a very high level, at a macro level, and it's categorized the kinds of issues that we have to address? And we have examples of procedures in other planning areas of how to get from that macro level through to the action level, where now we've budgeted it, we're going to do it. And there's a whole priority-setting process. For instance, the example I have in mind now is the transportation study that's been done and is now being prioritized. And this would be something of the same thing. But the thing that you're urging is, don't put it off.
Yeah.
Get going on it now.
Yes.
Take this so that for each department or each board or committee that you come to and say, this is your piece, plan for it in the next year. Pick out what you're going to do and get going on the part that's yours.
And although it's at a high level, we did try to give very specific examples of things that will need to be done.
Right, but there's
and
a lot
of data. There's a tremendous amount of data that we ended up collecting.
Right.
That will facilitate these studies, feasibility studies and others to get going. And there's money for the feasibility studies from the state.
Well, may we bring it in? Rosemary.
Hi.
Okay, I'm Rosemary Drigger Carey, Precinct 5. And thank you very much, Charles, for that report tonight and to your team. It's really excellent, and I've seen you speak about 3 or 4 times, and every time I do, I learn something new, and the report is jaw-dropping. And Charlotte, you just characterize it as very high level. Yes, it is, but it's also extremely accessible, and that is amazing. And the more the public can read it and watch the presentations that are available online, the better. I came here tonight with my colleagues from Falcan, Falmouth Climate Action Network, and I think walking in the room, our hearts were bursting that so many people came to hear about coastal resiliency. Yeah. I think we would have coastal resiliency be first on the agenda of every town meeting if we really are treating the climate emergency as the emergency it is. It should be our first priority. And what a lost opportunity to educate everybody in the room and people tuning in who might get tired because this doesn't really, the property issues don't really affect them, so they tuned out. So that's one suggestion I would give this committee. But a bigger suggestion is Falcan is bringing a warrant article to town meeting in the spring to hire a sustainability director for Falmouth. And this idea comes after considerable research by Falcan members who are all very passionate and scientists, realtor, grandparents. We bring a lot of different perspectives. We talked to 7 towns, including Martha's Vineyard. We talked to sustainability directors there about their positions and boiled it down to a number of things, but coastal resiliency is, of course, part and parcel and the highest priority of that. So we see a sustainability director position being created as a really good start to get this process going, to look for the grants that are coming down the pike, big grants through ARPA, and I think $9 billion or something is coming our way, and so there needs to be someone at this time looking out for those opportunities for Falmouth. We also learned in our talks with sustainability directors that a sustainability director in Massachusetts basically brings in 8 to 12 times their salary in grants or savings to the town. And this is not a one-time hit. Every year that someone is, focusing on sustainability and coastal resiliency and grants and so on, it actually brings savings and revenues to the town. So it's a good investment. So that's basically it. We hope that the planning board will look favorably on that, see the connections between the urgency to act on coastal resiliency, and we would hope that if an advisory committee is formed, that people from Falcan be part of that. Also, the grant opportunities is probably the one takeaway that we hope that you remember, that the sustainability director can focus on this for the town. Okay, thank you so much.
You make a really good point. I think a lot of governments, local governments, haven't noticed that the structure of government over the last 40 years has changed dramatically, so that now it's intergovernmental. And people who've not staffed up to, in effect, milk the federal government are missing out enormously.
Exactly. So it's not one person. I think we all agree on that, but a sustainability director is a good start. And in getting those grants, they can show that the town has the capacity to pull it off. Otherwise, they would not be looked upon favorably by the grant makers. So it's something we need to take action on quickly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead. I'll come back if there's any more questions.
My name is Lynn Shad. I'm a resident of Falmouth. I'm the grandmother of the group, Falcan. So I just wanted to sort of raise my words in support of certainly all the work that Charles and his group has done with this study. I don't know about anybody else, but every single day I read something in the newspaper, local newspaper, regional newspapers, that we have a very serious climate emergency here. And I get a little concerned when I hear things like it's 50 years out, or we're just thinking about this thing on a very high level. We really need to start to take those words and put them into action. And I am very encouraged by the fact that Falmouth has declared a climate emergency. I'm also very encouraged by a lot of the work that has already been done with the different community, studies that have been done. I think it's time now for us to take those studies and find the experts for our town to be able to put this into action. Because our economic well-being, our environmental well-being, in many cases, maybe even our health and physical well-being are really at stake here. So I just wanted to lend my support that if we could get a team, if it's one person, a sustainability director, or a combination position, sustainability director, coastal resiliency director, to start coordinating all of the departments to have this as a priority in all of their thoughts going forward, because it may not be as far off as we think. So thank you.
Any comments from the board?
No, I think it's time to move on.
It is time to move on, and I want to thank you all for your concern and for keeping this in front of the town until the town does something. Mr. Suso tried, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago to get a community development officer to coordinate all the building departments, all the departments that are involved in the built environment. It would have been so nice if that had happened. We'd have that structure now, but we might get that structure in the reasonable future and be able to focus on the action that you're looking for. But thank you all very much. And now we will move on. The next thing we had wanted to just... Oh, Paul?
I say thanks, Charlie.
Oh, thank you to Charlie. I feed Charlie a lot, so I feel he knows I'm grateful. Okay.
You know him, right?
Okay.
Hmm?
You know him, right?
I do, actually. Right. So the next discussion item we have, we're missing one of the board members who's active in it, the Davis Straits Form-Based Code Working Group. Jim, you and Pat are our representatives.
Right, we haven't had anything new since the last time we talked. The biggest thing that came up, and we're kicking back and forth, and there seems to be some opposition to some of the ideas, that's really the parking along Davis Straits. I think that that's something that needs to get sorted out. The bike people don't want to have parking there. They want to make sure it's a great access road for bikes to get through, and they don't see a shopping district with neighbors and car doors opening and shopping going back and forth compatible with their vision of it. And the town needs to make that decision, because I don't think you can have both. You really can't have a busy retail section like downtown and a highway and a bike path and all different things going right through it.
Right.
Well, you could have a bike path inboard of a sidewalk.
Well, they were objecting to the parking,
Yeah.
is what I'm
Oh, I
saying.
know,
And
I know.
if we go that way, that's okay. We just won't be putting retail and housing there. It'll become more of a highway.
Yeah. No, I'm
And-
just
and
saying,
that
there is a way to have a bike.
Right, there
path
is, but that
and on-street parking.
that decision needs to be made really early in the process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if
It
that's.
does, because it changes
Yeah,
everything about it.
So, I mean.
Yeah.
But they actually said, when I brought it up at the Zoom meeting, that we should come in front of them and present our ideas to the bike path. That's
not an unreasonable thing to do.
So,
But it is an unreasonable thing to think that we would think one group of users would dictate the whole thing. That is unreasonable.
I agree. My point being is that decision needs to be made fairly early in the process, because it's somewhat mutually exclusive unless you move the bike path further in. The vision was to have the stores out close to the street and then a sidewalk and parking and slow traffic,
Yeah.
not zipping through, so that people can get in and out and shop. And they're pretty much fundamentally opposed to it, and that's okay, but I'd like the decision to be made earlier than later, because it's hard to, I don't want to battle with them all the way through.
No, they need to drive down Bennington Street in East Boston. and
They do,
you
they
can
need
See
to
how it's done.
see a lot of different places
Yeah.
where what they've done
Yeah,
in order to make it compatible, because it's not incompatible,
yeah, it isn't.
is to say, okay, we're gonna keep what is now Main Street, Davis Straits and Main Street. We're gonna keep that as our major access, as it is for Main Street here in the proper part of Main Street. But what we're going to do is we're going to put a bike path, not even connected to Main Street, but very near it, so that they have through access if that's what they want. They have near off ramps to get to the stores that we're envisioning being along that Main Street, so that they're included. They're just not included in the midst of what we're trying to make a walkable area. We're going to, as I understand the Davis Straits reset plan, the area that they've now divided it in, I don't know if you followed this at all, but they've now divided it into 3 major areas. One they're calling Davis Straits, which wasn't quite where I thought it would be, and one is now going to be called North Main Street, and then Worcester Court. Well, it could be that the...
Yeah.
North Main?
North Main would be over here,
Yeah,
Charlotte.
that, West Main,
They call it Main Street North.
Main
Call
Street.
it Main Street North.
really?
It's just like a district within the Davis Straits
Yeah, I mean,
study
the thing
area.
that we were given, our copy of the plan.
Okay, we'll take your word for it.
Okay, whatever they were doing. So, is you'd take the route, you know where Catherine Lee Bates
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
Well, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
Sure, so you kind of extend Catherine Lee Bates in your mind, so that the bike people go there.
The comment came up in the last meeting, and that's all I'm bringing up, is that we suggested that the town take back from the state the fee, the ownership of the road, and therefore we could change what we want. We could put parking if we
Right,
want
and we've
to.
asked them, right?
Right. And they were opposed to that. They were really pushing complete streets and, you know, the aspect going right through the middle of that, and not, they specifically didn't want parallel parking.
I heard them say that, because I was
That's the
listening
point.
in.
That was the only thing I wanted to report, that was in direct of all the things that I've been trying to do, that was just the opposite, totally
Oh.
opposite thing.
Well, I don't see it as a roadblock. I see it as, okay, so let's try and work this out. And I would think what we're lacking right now are, let's have some alternatives to show all of us alternatives, how you can make compatible their needs with what we're trying to do there for retail development. Not that hard.
They were particularly talking about the right-of-way.
I heard them,
Okay, that's what I was referencing.
and it is, and I don't see, I think forcing it to a decision, you win, we lose, or whatever, not a good idea. Better to come up with some alternatives.
I mean, a good alternative would be, you know, Catherine Lee Bates, other ways around it, with
Right.
connections through, like you spoke, but that decision needs to be made,
Those
which way we're
choices
gonna
need to
go.
be pictured.
Right.
Right
Earlier,
now,
sooner than
We're
later.
responding to the pictures that Union Studios and, I keep forgetting their name, Howarth, whatever they're called.
Horsley Witten.
Who?
Horsley Witten.
Portly Witten, I have to learn to say that. We need to ask them to create these alternatives that we can see.
I'd like to just give you a little more background on this. I'm the planning board representative to the Transportation Committee.
Mhm.
And at the last meeting, I was asked to give a presentation on Davis Straits. And I said, why would the Transportation Committee be interested in Davis Straits? It's a development project that the planning board has been working on for the last couple of years, and it involves a number of different things. And at the meeting, it was really morphed into the objection to having parking on the street. And I was criticized for that. And I said, well, a couple of members of the committee are very interested in having Main Street extended down with parking on the street. I said, I don't know if the state would go for that. That's something we'd have to find out. But it was just an issue that had come up. So it wasn't really about Davis Straits. It was really about the parking. The meeting this Thursday, the item on the agenda is whether there should be a joint letter objecting to the parking from the planning board and the bike and pedestrian committee. So I think if the bike and pedestrian committee are opposed to it, that's perfectly fine. They should make that known and should make it make it obvious, but
Paul, it may or may not be fine, but it's not fine for the conversation about the Davis reset plan to be reduced to a conflict point. There's no need for that. There's no need for that, and it really ought to be headed off before it gets there.
I'm just giving you the background, what had occurred. And I had said that a couple people wanted it. I don't know if the state's going to go with it. Let's see what happens.
We proposed that if the town wanted to take it back, it was once all town roads, and then eventually became state roads, but if it stays state roads, we can't do what we want to do. The only way to do the parking that we want is to take it back and have it not be a state road.
Okay, but let's move back a ways.
Yeah.
Where this conversation began, as I recall, is back when we were doing surveys about this, about, where do we do at Davis Straits and what do we want? And we heard a lot from, or it seemed like a lot from the business people along Main Street about what would make a good thing. And that what they said is the studies that they showed at that point, one I can recall from Florida, was it from Miami? I don't know where it was, somewhere in Florida, and some in North and South Carolina. Remember them, Jim? Where if you have parking along the street and you get activity of a lot of people coming out of their cars, walking on the sidewalks, going right into the stores, the retail sales are fantastic. And as soon as you don't have parking on the street, you don't have retail sales. So all of these business people had read these reports, and they're pro-parking. If you want to have mixed commercial and residential development, so that you have a lively area along Davis Straits instead of a highway through parking lots, then we became convinced that you really need to have on-street parking. That's how we got there. Has anyone taken the time to talk with the bike people about why we're espousing this?
Yes, that's what we brought up at the meeting.
But I was listening to the meeting, and I didn't hear that actually argument being made.
Well, I thought we said it was an integral part of trying to create a neighborhood there with stores and houses and people and not highways and parking lots. That's really the whole theme behind Davis Straits.
It is.
And their process was more public access, bike path, more of almost like a highway for bikes and getting through. And I think that's fine. We got to get our plan to decide which way. I don't think you can have a bike path and the parallel parking. It has to be separated off to the side in one place or relocated to another area.
Well, I think it's nice that they invited us to come and talk with them about it, and we ought to take them up on it.
Can I make a comment here? I was going to bring it up the announcements. Thursday night at 7 o'clock is a Transportation Committee meeting. And it'll be a panel discussion inviting about 7 or 8 of the business owners in town. And it's going to be a presentation on the downtown parking area that the report was done some time ago. And they're going to participate on what their thoughts are on downtown parking in that whole area. So I suggest we hold off any criticism and things like that until we see what this panel discussion comes up with.
That sounds really great. Where is that going to be?
So it's a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
And it's Thursday at 7 o'clock this week. And it's a Transportation Committee meeting. The agenda's on the website. And you can see what the business people think. And I think that's a good way of going, frankly.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Who have you invited?
Dan Maxwell, although he's in St. Bart's, he's going to be on Zoom. Someone from Liam McGuire's, someone from Karen Ronaldo is another one. I can't think of them all now, but there's about 7 or 8 people who are participating, including the Mike Kasparian and the Chamber of Commerce. So there's about 8 people going to be on the panel discussion. So it might be very revealing to see what they say.
It will be.
So before we get too far off kilter, let's see what the business community says, and that might be very enlightening.
It will be. Pam?
So, I'm just trying to think how many years ago this was. I think it's worthwhile to look up what happened to the city of Buffalo. So the city of Buffalo had a thriving downtown, but the traffic got too much. So they created an underground for transportation. The businesses died. They absolutely died. And it was, to me, a wonderful composite sketch of if you don't do the work beforehand, what can happen to a city or a town. If you can't park where you shop, then everything dies. And to me, I mean, I knew nothing from Buffalo. I just had a conference and for EPA, and we all merged into the city and saw what happened. I mean, it was.
They lost the football game.
I know.
Boston did the same thing to Washington Street,
Yeah,
which was the main commercial street. It was a
Yeah.
great street.
yeah,
And they made it a pedestrian way when those were the fad.
yeah.
And they killed all the stores
They
along
ruined
it.
Yeah,
They even killed Jordan Marsh. It was
yeah, they tore the building down.
Yeah.
Well, look at Wareham and Buzzards Bay, when 25 bypassed it.
right.
You know, it's a story you hear over and over when they change roads and they bypass the areas of business, and it's nothing new.
Nothing new.
Moving on.
No,
Yes.
moving on. So this is great that they're having the panel on it now. And we
Panel
just.
discussion.
Panel, yeah. And it, you have to bring people along with it, I hope.
Wish I could say there was a football game
Oh,
on tonight. I have to get home to watch
I
it.
asked Jed to send out the draft that the subcommittee is using, the committee is using, so that we would all be able to see the pictures, we would see what they're doing, and be able to channel our comments to Pat, who, she's not well now, but she'll be back next, and to Jim, because they are going to all these meetings and speaking up, and they're letting me watch, and I can't tell you how frustrating it is to sit there and not be able to say, wait a sec, you can't, so that we have to put our comments through our members here. Okay, but it's good to keep track of that plan. Moving on, Lewis Neck Road, we're gonna get an update, from Jed who's gonna give us some information.
Sure, Madam Chair, if I may, just on the Davis Straits really quickly. We do expect a draft bylaw from our consultants next month. So things are progressing. The draft bylaw that you have in your packet has a lot of areas where they highlighted in yellow where, we had a lot of lively discussion, as Jim mentioned, about parking and building heights and all sorts of different things. But the good news is we're going to receive a draft, a final draft in February, and we can start pushing the ball down the field
Right.
a bit more. So that's the good news.
Well, and they're going to do illustrations just for us.
Right.
Yeah, which
Right.
they haven't yet.
So Lewis Neck, as you all may be aware, we received an A&R plan on the 7th of December. And at that time, obviously, we were going through our transition period. And so we reached out to former town planner just to get a sense for how we can handle this. It was recommended that we get an extension, to give us a little bit more time to accommodate it. And then as I was preparing for the last meeting, in consultation with our current consultant, Brian Curry, he indicated that we really couldn't have asked for that extension, that there's really no ability to do that with an A&R plan. It just so happened that that was the day after the 21-day period had already expired. So essentially, the A&R was constructively approved. It went through that 21-day period.
For how many units?
Just one.
One unit,
It's just
just
a
one
one buildable lot, yep. So it was just to remove the note on the previous A&R plan that said lot 1 was not a buildable lot. So just wanted to provide that update, and
Thank you.
now we know there are no extensions for A&Rs. So
Right.
Hold to that 21-day clock.
Okay, and now, Kevin's waited all this time. Dylan's Way.
I recuse myself.
Kevin, did you want to speak to this? How are we handling this?
I was more curious as to what the board's discussion was going to be, and then speak to the board.
Rebut.
Because I haven't, I've only, I've had a brief discussion with Frank Duffy about what the board may consider, but the way I left it with Frank was, it's up to the board to decide what they want to do, and I hadn't heard anything beyond that. So I'm here tonight just to see what that discussion was, and I had some thoughts on it, certainly. So my conversation with Frank was that the board could consider, under Master General Laws, Chapter 81, to effectively revisit the conditions of the plan. I sent Frank a note on Thursday, January 6th, and I'll read it. But it says, "Hi Frank, thanks for taking the time to speak with me this morning and clarify that issue. I had an opportunity to review Master General Laws, Chapter 81W, and wanted to raise one additional point for your consideration. The second paragraph of Chapter 81W states, no modification, amendment, or rescission of the approval of a plan of a subdivision or changes in such plan shall affect the lots in such subdivision which have been sold or mortgaged in good faith and for valuable consideration subsequent to the approval of the plan, or any rights appertinent thereto, without the consent of the owner of such lots and of the holder of the mortgage or mortgages." I went on to state the entirety of the subdivision was conveyed from the Bingamans to Cape Cod Development LLC on April 26, 2021, and a mortgage for $1.8 million was granted by Main Street Bank that same day, all in reliance on the existing planning board decision. Given that the property was mortgaged in good faith, I don't believe the planning board can modify without the consent of the mortgage holder. I realize that the board has not yet determined if they do in fact want to seek a modification pursuant to Chapter 81W, but I think that at a minimum, this should be part of their consideration. Regards, Kevin Clower.
Thank you.
So that was the last correspondence I had with Frank, and I hadn't heard anything beyond the fact that the board could consider it.
That was shared with us, and I think everyone had a chance to take a look at that. Right. Jed, did you want to say anything on it before we discuss it?
Only to summarize a little bit more detail there, it's in regards to the decision that you folks read into the record in February related to the 6-lot subdivision. There was a clause missing that required the installation of denitrification septic systems. And so the question was, if it is missing in the decision, what does that mean? And can the board reconsider said decision? And I think Kevin summarized it very well. That's what Frank Duffy mentioned to me, that through Master General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81, it indicates that the board can do it on its own, but as Kevin described, it would have to go along with the consent of the current owner because it was sold. That is our understanding at this point. So it's
Did we in any way seek that consent?
not as of yet. Not as of yet. Not formally, anyway, the board. And so it's out for a discussion for you to, toss around and
We
see how
haven't
you want to
required it
proceed.
yet,
No, we haven't required it.
so it's hard to seek consent before we,
I just wondered if it had happened.
no, we haven't, at least
No.
this is something that we just didn't put in a condition, right? It didn't happen, didn't make the meeting, wasn't
Apparently, it
written
came
in.
up briefly in the discussion, but not much, and not enough to actually make it in as a condition.
Correct.
And the project is going forward. So now it would be saying, oh, wait a sec, after the fact, after your planning, after your financing plans are in place, we want you to add this for, is it for 5 or 6 houses?
6.
6 houses.
6, yeah.
Which is considerable. So that's what it would be. So
The-
it would appear that we can just say, we made a mistake, and it'd be difficult to rectify it, and let it go.
I think, Ms. Harris, I think there may be a way to correct, maybe find a good solution for the board and for the applicant, which maybe the board could open their decision and include that as a waiver. Because then, we know moving forward, it needs to be part of the decision. But that way, it's not just this hanging chad of an issue. So that was one thing we had thought that might be a possibility, which obviously, I think that would have the consent of the owner and the mortgagee. Because the issue with adding that is the mortgage, which is considerable in size, was based on certain pro formas of cost and expected return. And changing that, which in what might be a relatively dramatic manner, I think would be pretty unfair. But I think that perhaps by adding it as a granted waiver might be a way to address that, or just to leave it alone.
Is that
That's
something
interesting.
that Jed could do?
You could pursue that.
Initial conversations with Frank indicated that the bylaw is the bylaw. Though it was missing in the decision, the bylaw still requires certain elements to be either submitted and/or decided at a planning board meeting. So his take on this was, it's clearly laid out that it would be a requirement. So to Kevin's point, yes, that would be an option. There appears to be another option where, you would require the applicant to do it as well. I guess it's really just going to come up to the board if you want to either waive it or do the requirement, but, asterisk here is that you need the consent of, at least that's the understanding at this point, you would need consent of the applicant.
And it's definitely a requirement because this development is in a wetland area, right?
Technically in 2 coastal pond overlaid areas.
And that's why it's a requirement, and we should have insisted on it.
Correct.
Because the concern is for the aquifer there and putting this number of septic systems on it. I don't know enough about.
Would the health department have any weigh in on that?
So the health department did provide a referral that indicated just that it is in the coastal pond and that it would require denitrification.
Okay.
That information did get into a staff report and that was forwarded over to the applicant, or at least to the applicant's attorney at the time. And it just didn't make it into the print of the final decision.
Right.
So, and there was, mention of it at a meeting. Again, it just didn't make it into the print.
The amount of money at stake, the range, just give us an idea of the scale.
I don't know that exactly.
How many houses?
Maybe 6 lots. I've heard estimates of $30,000 a piece.
$30,000 a piece, something like $40,000 a piece?
If not
additional
more.
expense on the development, something like that, for a denitrification system.
Well, and isn't it true that some of these houses are being priced to be affordable, so they'll go on the SHI?
I don't know that.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't know that.
No, I don't think so. It's
It's a raw market rate.
Sounds like
it's a cluster development, not a 40B.
Okay.
Which means they put them on smaller lots.
To preserve
Open space
But there's open space.
that goes with it. I think it's a mistake that we made. I think we have a choice of waive it or ignore it. I don't believe we're ever going to get the people that have financed it and bought it to agree to an additional expense. Out of the goodness of their hearts for it, I think that's unrealistic.
Wouldn't it be true that if they're market rate housing, whether they're cluster or not, they're going to add it on to the sale price of the house?
One would think.
They might be market rates, but they're competing with other houses that that don't have that. So when you look at the houses that require, and I think there's a question whether D-night systems actually work. We should probably get a report from the Board of Health on the effectiveness of D-night before we make this decision. And I don't know, how many D-night systems are there in town? How many of them are actually producing? What are the numbers? The original D-nights were doing 19 parts per million or something like that, and now they're trying to get, we should have the environmental people here for this, or the Board of Health, but I think maybe it's 6 parts per million is what they're recommending to get to now. And how many do we have in town that are actually performing at that level?
I would have to check with, folks from.
But why don't we ask the Board of Health for something like that before we make any decision?
Certainly up to the board, if you'd like to do that.
Paul?
Not the Board of Health, it's the Water Quality Management Committee. And they've been assessing this, particularly with one of the members of the board who's very knowledgeable on this. And there is some concern that the systems that are being in place are not meeting the required goals. So they are evaluating it. It's not the Board of Health doing it, it's the
Water Quality Management?
Water Quality Management Committee. And I attend most of their meetings, and they have discussed this on a number of occasions on what they might be able to do. But there is some concern about meeting the intended requirements. So how do you force someone to get into a denied system if it doesn't meet the requirement. So they're concerned about it. If you want, we can get somebody from
Just gonna suggest.
from that committee to come here and talk about it. George Schufelter might be the one to talk about it.
I'd like to just to see if we can move beyond it, I'd like to make a proposal, we just waive the condition and move on and just grant him a waiver.
So just to be clear, tonight is just a discussion.
Right.
Right.
That's an option we can bring up.
Mhm.
I think
don't
that's.
know about that
well,
option,
well,
but I would like to get more information
Well,
about this.
we should, or we could just ignore it. I mean, I think we have to address it. I don't think we can ignore it. It looks like it was a mistake that we made, and it's probably during transition. I don't know why it happened, what was going on in February. I don't know. We missed it. It wasn't done. It should have been a condition. And it wasn't. But can we, after the fact, change it? Sounds like that we heard if it's been sold or financed, we need the owner's permission, and I believe this property has been both, sold and financed. So,
Well, this is just a discussion. We're not going to decide tonight, so that there's time to get more information. And part of the more information would be speaking with the owner to find out, is that permission forthcoming? Because if it is, good. Then we've protected the aquifer, we've done what we needed to do for the environment, and we have not violated our own requirements. That would be a good thing.
I don't know if it's a requirement. I believe it's something that we have the right to waive.
You do.
I think it comes up all the
Well,
time.
we do. We've been advised that.
Right, so it's kind of like these streets we're talking about. If we
Yeah.
feel that it's fairness and equity, we could waive it if we see so fit.
Yes, we can.
I know up on Cobblestone Lane a few years ago, as a condition, it was waived, which I think was.
Because the sewer plant's right next to it, right?
But that's not on sewer, and,
Right, the area's not sewer, but there's a lot of distance between it.
but I think that is a water resource protection district as well.
Most of the town is, isn't it, if you look at the
There-
chart?
there-
I mean, if
big
we
chunk-
had
big
the
chunks of it, yes.
GIS map up, you'd show
yeah.
about 80% of the towns are water
My
resource.
only point there was it has been waived in the past for certain.
Yeah, we've waived it in the
developments.
past, yeah, that's, so well, let's look at the effectiveness of the septic systems and then decide whether we want to issue a waiver or not. Does that sound like a plan?
Well, and speak to the owner, see.
Is timing an issue here?
I mean, I suspect it probably is on some level, because they're, we're trying to, they've been clearing and trying to move this forward.
Sure.
So, I certainly suspect there is an element of time, because if plans were to have to change, it would have to change yesterday.
Pretty soon, right.
So, there is some time elements here. I think that, there are avenues open to the board where this can be addressed without setting any sort of precedent or creating future problems in a way that doesn't complicate the reliance that has existed on this decision from both the buyer and the lender in terms of the financing and the pro formas that were put forth. So I think the board has options available to it if they're so inclined.
I think we should explore both options, is what I think, and we have time to do it.
Did I understand you to say that the town council said if it's in the bylaw, it may still apply?
That was his initial opinion, was that even though it didn't make it into the decision, the bylaw still applies.
Right.
But to Kevin's point, in the bylaw, there is, and Jim's point, there is a provision that the board can waive that requirement. But again, that wasn't listed in the decision, so we're sort of in that.
What did the town
Murky
council
water.
say about the ability, it can apply only with the owner's permission once it's been financed?
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
And the lender, and the
And the lender.
mortgagor.
Right.
Yeah, yes, that's what I heard. Why don't you-
Yes,
that
that
was,
is-
so that we can't just apply it. We've missed it, we can try to apply it, but we need the owner's
We think
permission.
that's what it says, but this
No, he
is
said
one
it.
more area to be cleared up.
That is the current understanding
That's exactly what it said.
of Mass
That's
General
what he
Law,
just said too. I thought I heard it twice.
Chapter 41, Section 81W, is that because it was sold, you would, in theory, need that consent. Although that has not been firmly sort of, put in print as of yet with town council. But may I propose That is the working
Oh, that
understanding.
letter was Kevin's letter, not the town council's letter that was read.
I believe that they have,
I thought
that they understand it to be correct.
Okay.
But again, that's still being worked out. But
I'm
perhaps,
hearing two different legal opinions. One is the one that we saw in the blueprint, the 81W, where yes, without the owner's consent, you cannot do this because of these circumstances. And the other is, it's part of the bylaw, so it applies anyway, whether we slipped up in putting it in the finding or not. So there's those two legal opinions, there's not just one. And that's what really needs to be cleared up. And in the meantime, we can get more information from the owner, who may have a solution also, and from the water quality
Water Quality Management Committee.
Ms. Harris, if I can interject for a moment, I think really, and I don't want to put words in Frank Duffy's mouth, I would never dream of doing so, but what I've heard Jed say and what I've said are certainly that, the board has an option. The board could seek to receive owner approval and lender approval for a modification of the decision, or perhaps you could also open the decision to waive it. I think it's worth noting that there is one lot that's already under agreement to be sold, so there is some time constraints here. To say that we have time to figure it out isn't entirely true. It is, I think we need to address this as quickly as we can. But as I've said, when a decision issues, there's understandably reliance on that decision. And I think that's the point of Section 81W, which is to say that once it's been relied on and it's been used for a lender and for a buyer, that the board cannot unilaterally come in and impose additional conditions or rescind an approval at that point. So I think that really what we're hearing is the board has a choice to make as to how they want to proceed, not necessarily that there's various legal opinions that need to be sussed out, that the board has a decision.
And it's up to the owner, essentially. And you ask them, do you want to do this? And they say no, then we have no other choice to either just ignore it or issue a waiver.
That may be true, or it may not be true. Frank doesn't seem to believe quite that that's true. How much of a hardship is it to wait until February 8th?
just to be, if I may, we wouldn't be able to do the 8th because in order to modify a decision, we would need a proper notification period. So you'd be probably looking at the 22nd of February to allow for that notification, because you're reopening the public hearing and notifying butters, all of that, and then you're making a decision. So that gives us enough time to notify. So it would be the 22nd.
I mean, quite honestly, it's not ideal, but I don't think we have much of a choice because we need to have this addressed.
Right.
One way or the other. But I think, as I've said, I think that the board has a decision that they can make, and I think that there is an avenue here to addressing this that doesn't really set a future precedent and isn't going to present an issue to the now owner or the development in general.
Well, it's been pointed out that this was just a discussion item. So we're apparently going to wait till the 22nd, no matter what. So I think we know what we're looking for, and we'll
seek out the answers.
We'll take it up on the 22nd.
Very good.
On what date?
22nd of February. I'm sorry that we can't do it tonight. I have one more thing I wanted to ask you about, Jed, that you could inform the board. The Santos have appealed?
They have.
On what basis?
Well, as I've been instructed by our current consultant, if that's a question that you need answers to, I can answer them in the office, but I can't speak openly about it. It's an open litigation. So we have to, I can answer any questions that you might have,
But not here.
but not in a public setting.
Great. Does anyone have any announcements?
I do.
John?
So in your packet, we put in, I'm the representative for CPC.
Yeah.
So these are our town meeting articles for April on the front page, and then on the subsequent pages it explains them and also gives the dollar amount that we're hoping the town will vote to award, just to keep you updated on what we've been doing.
Okay, great, thank you. I see they're gonna fund more for affordable housing, or they're putting that forward.
Yes,
Yeah, that's great.
but also some nice historic
Yeah.
projects and the Little League baseball field and updating, and so we've had quite a season already.
Yeah, they have.
But I wanted to update everybody what's been going on.
Thank you, and thank you for your service on that
Can
board.
I ask a question about these?
Mhm.
John, I looked through these a little bit, and for example, at the Edward Marks building, it's talking about $119,000 to the exterior of the building. If I remember correctly, initially, they were only doing down the first floor. And then they were going to add the second floor refurbishment. Is that not included, or was that done on a separate
It's not
fund?
included. I think this is, I'd have to reread it, but I think it's for the front entrance.
Well, it has the explanation here.
Yes.
But the question is that there was some talk about, you know,
There-
initially the town was just going to do downstairs and move a group in there. And then some of the historic people said, well, if you're going to do it, why don't you do the upstairs as well instead of ignoring it? And now this is coming to the exterior, and I'm wondering if they're going to continue to use community development funding for the second floor.
Yes, but they're working on trying to figure out exactly what they want to do with it and what it's going to cost.
That would be another request.
Correct. But this, I guess the front is in pretty bad condition, and they want to get it, they have to get it fixed.
Makes sense to do the building envelope first before you do the inside.
Yeah.
Right, and those, just to be clear, those are two separate projects.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, the other question I had is in Article 2. There's almost $250,000 for the EDIC station, the exterior rehabilitation. Is that based on a study, or what was the basis of that?
Yes, yes, they had an architect, and they presented, and they will get several bids before they actually get awarded the contract.
Okay, obviously, it's a lot more than I anticipated.
Yes, it was a surprise, but it does need an awful lot of work.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further announcements, we did have correspondence, but it was related to Telegraph Hill pressure,
Yes.
water pressure, so I think we've already discussed
Brought
that.
that up.
Just a quick comment, there's nothing we can do about, right, well, they can put pumps, but the town's gravity fed, right? If
Yeah.
you're up on top of a hill, you get bad water pressure.
Right. Not our problem.
Right.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. Okay. Future agenda items,
Termination of access policy, we need to revisit that,
we definitely do.
because I think there is some work
Yeah,
around.
it doesn't make sense to have a policy that we really don't,
That we
Well,
can't.
we can't use.
we can have both. We can, there's workaround.
Right.
So, we'll discuss it
I don't even remember, I think Pat might have been chairman when this came, how did this thing get passed? I don't think it was done when I was chairman.
What, the policy?
Yeah. Were you on the board when it passed?
Yes.
So you remember
But
voting?
it was early on, so I didn't have any, back history to sort of attach the information to. So I remember it getting done, but we've had trouble with it ever since. And I think the trouble with it, okay, there's several troubles with it. We shouldn't discuss it now.
No,
It's a future agenda item.
Future
And I
agenda.
think maybe we ought to put up a subgroup to kind of pick at it, to come forward with some alternatives to it before we try to have another discussion, because it's so hard to have these
Well, we
discussions.
gotta do it quick, because it's coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Coming up, so it would have to be immediately. Is anyone, I'm willing to work on it. Is anyone else willing and has an idea on this?
I didn't hear you.
To be on a little subcommittee to think of alternatives to our current policy about road width. It's the road width that's killing us.
The determination of access.
Yeah.
It's width, it's the clear height, and it's the surface. There's 3 areas.
That's true. So
You
it's
have to
all
look
of
at
it.
all 3.
You'd have to look at all 3.
So there's the surface, the trees, and the width.
Actually, someone who has actually done this would be very helpful.
I'll be glad to join.
Thank you. So John will.
Is
will
it
help.
overtime?
Double time, John.
Now we're talking.
We get double time when we work on things.
I got 2.
Are you going to work on it?
No,
Oh.
I thought you finished that.
No, I have one guaranteed person to work on it. Anyone else? Pam? Okay, great. And I'll give you a call, we'll get together, and we'll try to come up with some options for the rest of the board to take a look at the next meeting, because we really need a way out of this bind.
It's
Other items?
self-imposed, we put ourselves
I
into
don't
it.
think it's that difficult. I think there's some amendments we can do, but future discussion.
Okay, you don't want to serve on the Luke committee?
I haven't got the time right now.
Oh. Okay. So, Paul?
I have two suggestions. One was, if you'd like, I can ask either the chair or one of the representatives of the wastewater committee to come in and talk about the effectiveness of D-night systems, if that would be helpful. That's what we started talking about. Do they work or do they not work? And
Right.
they're doing some studies on it, and we could ask them to come in and tell them what they're doing on it.
Perhaps
But
at the
I'm just not
next
too sure where
meeting.
we would go with the information. John?
I had a meeting with Mr. Turkington last Friday
Yeah?
about this exact same thing, and he gave me a lot of really interesting information. He said he'd be happy to come here because the bylaw that we have really is not working properly. It's really out of date. And he would like to come in here and see if we can't make some adjustments to it.
Okay.
Would that be a consultant? Who would that be?
As an example, he gave me a document, so that
I don't know who.
there's
would.
260.
Eric Turkington.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
There's
Oh,
269 systems. Mr. Waterbury, when he was here, 269 systems, IA systems in the town of Falmouth. And according to the committee, to meet the 6 parts per million, only 3 of them out of 269. So
That's the kind of discussion been
Yeah,
going on
right.
with the Water Quality Management Committee. I'm just suggesting we have somebody here and talk about it, who's
Right,
been
that's what I'm
studying this
saying.
for some time, and I agree with you.
And he said he'd be happy to come in here and update us so that we can review.
I think it'd be really helpful, okay, with that information, to have him come and have it be a public presentation,
Yes,
so that when we make our decision, it's clear it was based on concern for the environment. It wasn't just,
reality. We need reality.
based on reality, not a
Yes.
patchwork on a mistake.
Because a lot of,
So could you organize that for us?
Perhaps for the next meeting?
Yes, for the
Okay.
8th.
Or I can talk to him, I'm on the committee.
Great.
Whichever.
Put the two of you together. Yeah.
One other thing, we talked about maybe having the planner from Mashpee Commons come in, and we put that down the road. We may want to do that sometime. We got a lot going on right now, but maybe next month we can do that.
Okay, that sounds
I
good.
suggested that a couple
Who do
weeks
you mean by
ago.
the planner, the developer or the town planner?
No, the developer of
designer.
Mashpee Commons was responsible for
Developer,
that.
okay.
Yeah, you said you knew him.
Oh, yeah, he's on the EDIC now.
Yeah. I know, I talked to him at the
Yeah,
EDIC
no,
meeting. and he's-
you said planner, and I use the term
Well,
developer.
that's the one I mentioned at the
Semantics.
last meeting.
football
Okay,
game's going
let's
to be
not,
over.
let's put it off at least a month, because
Is
now
there a
we
game?
have loaded up the next meeting.
I wish there was.
With all the work that we put off today is going to come back to us on the 8th. So the 8th is already a very busy meeting.
I spent my day on
So
the
if we're
trusses
gonna-
on 3
I
houses.
suggested we put it off to some kind of the floor right there.
I'm beat.
You are.
The clicker for some kind of
Something.
device.
Let's leave it here. Not
That's my
long.
pacemaker.
I just shut it off.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn since it's 10 o'clock.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye, 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 aye.
Oh.